said he's going to be about 30 minutes late for the meeting today. So we will start with our favorite subject, short-term rental.
Not again.
And,
It's a never-ending story.
right. Just like to review for you where we are as far as direction given to date. Based on the answers that we've received from one around the table and the two previous discussions we've had. Home sharing will be a principal by right use throughout the city, conditioned only upon registration of Commissioner of the Revenue and payment of applicable transient occupancy tax of short-term rentals will be a principal use only in designated overlay or zoning districts. Outside of those districts, the short-term rental will require a conditional use permit. The city must permit short-term rentals as a principal by right use in the area defined by the Sandbridge SSD boundary pursuant to legislation enacted by the General Assembly earlier this year. All conditional use permits will include an expiration date that in 2 years from the date of adoption. The process for renewal of the conditional use permit will be administrative and performed by the planning department. However, the planning department shall notify the city council in writing prior to the renewal of any conditional use permit for a short-term rental. The short-term rental has been the subject of neighborhood complaints or code violations. Grandfathering all existing home shares and STRs as evidenced by registration to Commissioner of Revenue and payment of applicable TOT, that's taxes.
Transient occupancy tax.
Will be allowed to continue. The date to determine when a property is qualified for grandfathering will be July the 1st, 2018. Any future alteration or cumulative alterations that expand the overall square footage of the residential structure utilized as a short-term rental by more than 25% or 1,000 square feet, whichever is less, will terminate the grandfathered status. The grandfathered status shall run with the land but shall expire if the property is not registered for short-term rental use for more than 2 consecutive years. The issues to be addressed, and I think everybody has a copy of that, and I'm going to go down, try to go through some of them today, see if we can get some of them resolved if we may. The first one is should these regulations be contained in the city zoning ordinance or chapter 15 of the city code. Should the ordinance require all short-term rentals to post summaries of applicable city regulations? Should the short-term rentals be required to maintain $1 million of insurance coverage after the short-term activity? I think rather than read all of that, we'll just go through it. Yes,
Backing up to the one about the grandfathering status, if it's not registered for STR or use and pay taxes, because you could register and then not be utilizing it. So I think it's important that it not be active as an STR for 2 years to lose the grandfather status. Because you can just keep it registered on the books, but not be.
Provided that we can readily get that information from the commissioner, we can add that if that's the will of the body.
All right, will you look into that for us?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. All right. First question. Should these regulations be contained in the city zoning ordinance or chapter 15 of the city code? Would you explain why you have chapter 15 there?
This was a consideration that was intended to make enforcement more streamlined because we've discussed, and I would say even lamented, the lengthy process that is associated with enforcing the zoning ordinance because of the notice of violation requirement before the summons, which then triggers an appeal to the BZA, et cetera, et cetera. In looking back to prepare for today, though, I've looked again at 15.2983, which is the code section that the General Assembly passed 2 years ago that talks about what local governments can and cannot do. And in that code section, they specifically reserve, subsection D, if anybody at home wants to look, it specifically says that it reserves to the local governing body the right to make land use and zoning regulations. So I'm not sure if we put these in Title 15 of our code and tried to enforce them outside of land use and zoning, we could face a Dillon's Rule challenge. So I would actually recommend that we just remove this question if there's no objection and understand that it's going to have to be part of our zoning ordinance.
Anybody object to that?
No, that was my alternative. It called for that, and I agree. Plus, it allows us to have more customized regulations for each overlay district, and there are unique things.
Okay.
So-
Anybody else have any comments? Everybody okay with just removing that? All right, next question. Should the ordinance require all short-term rentals to post summaries of applicable city regulations? And everybody understand the question?
Well, I don't know have we defined what the universe of applicable regulations is?
Yes, sir. In the draft ordinances that went to the planning commission before, correct me if I'm wrong, but it included the prohibition against fireworks. It included the requirements for placing trash in the automated bins at the street. It included the city's noise ordinance. And there was one more, I believe. I'm looking for the other planning people to remind me.
Fires on the beach?
And no fires on the beach.
Follow-up question, how are we going to enforce that they've been posted?
Well, presumably we would make them aware of it at the time they register, and it would be report-based. If somebody told us they weren't there, we'd go out and look and see if it was actually posted. If it wasn't, then we would go through the process.
And that process is what?
As we discussed before, you'd give a
Give a
notice of
citation,
violation,
nope.
you'd go back and you'd see if they put it up.
Okay.
Jim?
With respect to this one, and then also there's one about fire extinguishers, carbon monoxide detectors, smoke detectors, et cetera. Other places actually do inspections when you do your sign up and you schedule an inspection, so that might be the way to do this. And they come in and do a quick safety inspection, life safety inspection to make sure that
When they
everything
sign up.
works. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the best way to do it, and that would solve the issue of whether or not this stuff is actually in place.
Do we want to charge a fee to come out and do the inspection like we do for other things?
I mean, I know Northampton County does. They charge, I think, $50 or $75.
All right, we'd have to establish that fee then, wouldn't we? Or who would establish that fee? Let me put it that way.
Well, council, I would think council would want to establish the fee based on a recommendation from the staff based upon the cost of doing those inspections. I will tell you that, again, in 15.2983, the registration provision in that code section talks about it being a, forget the term it's used right now, but it's, there's no conditions on that. It's just you simply show up and register. We would be taking the position, and I think it's a fair position to take, that the zoning ordinance and the requirements in the zoning ordinance are specifically permitted under D, but just know that there is a distinction between that administrative registration requirement and then establishing a fee schedule under the zoning ordinance.
Okay, Ms. Wilson first.
Is there a difference between people like doing an online thing or or people doing it through a real estate company.
Is there a legal distinction?
Well, right, I mean, if people are doing it through a real estate company, they're doing their inspections and all of that, rather than someone doing it through Airbnb to make sure that they're doing everything they're supposed to be doing.
Well, I don't sense that there is a legal distinction, but with respect to our regulation, and I'm not sure what justification we would be able to put in place for that. I appreciate what you're saying, but Airbnb could come in and say, we require inspections of all of ours as well. And some agencies, some brick and mortar companies may do inspections and others may not, or they may do them better or more frequently. So I'm not sure that
But how would Airbnb be doing the inspections? They're not here, whereas like Sandbridge Realty would be here.
I
I
understand.
mean, they've been doing these rentals for years and years and years. And they inspect their properties all the time, where someone just pops up and says, I want to rent my house on Airbnb. I mean, there really is a difference. I mean, I think maybe we need to think this through before we,
Well, that issue has come up before. And I think we have thought that the better view is that you should regulate short-term rentals by the property use rather than by how it's managed. But, if you want us to go back and look at that further, we can.
All right, Ms. Henley.
Well, just the fact that enforcement has been an issue all along. From the very beginning, we've talked about this. How are we going to enforce all these things that we come up with? I think we really are probably going to have an inspector or two that is hired specifically to keep up with short-term rentals. But we do collect this transient occupancy tax, and I think, there is the funding that's generated by the use that we certainly ought to be able to afford to hire an inspector who is the one who is kind of responsible for it. But I think we shouldn't do anything unless we expect we're going to enforce it. And we have to have the capability, the manpower to enforce it. And that's a recognition that we just need to have as we go into this.
All right, John, did you have another comment?
We have a current requirement, people know about it, because we had where people got seriously hurt, and I don't know if someone died or not, where a deck failed. Because we have a requirement that if you rent property, every 2 years, your deck is supposed to be inspected and certified by a structural engineer. Now, I'm sure all of us at the city, we've gone behind and checked up on all these houses that rent around the city and make sure they have a structural engineering certification that's not more than 2 years old. We know the answer is no. And what happens when someone had that happen? Well, they take a risk. They take a financial risk. And I suspect they took a huge risk on that particular thing, and the marketplace appropriately punishes people for making bad choices. All these places that rent down there have to get insurance. Insurance companies are not in the business of paying claims. They're in the business of collecting your money and making sure that you're doing things so they never have to pay you a claim. That's their business model, right?
right,
So,
Pretty
if that's
accurate.
the case, you gotta ask yourself if the public safety outcome, because there's a lot of decks down there, I bet you all of them haven't been inspected in the last 2 years, what do you bet? I bet you go check, a lot of them haven't been certified by a structural engineer, but no one's talking about that. So my point is, not giving people a false expectation that that somehow when something does go bad, they're going to be able to make and be what? All this is about financially being compensated. And so I'm just trying to, in my own mind, think of all the things that we don't go out and inspect for to ensure that people, because this is the big society, people make informed choices. They buy cars, they buy lots of stuff. So what's the policy outcome that we are trying to achieve in this regulation? Or it'd be nice to hear from the insurance companies who insure some of these places, and what is it they're requiring of these folks to have them insured? Because we may find out that it is being self-policed. I don't know that it isn't, but we haven't heard from the industry that is actually insuring the risk. and what are they doing? That would be very interesting as we look at what regulations we have to have. I'm sure if you're, had a big home at Sandbridge and you got the elevator in it, I bet you the insurance company wants to make sure you have what? Fire detector, carbon monoxide detector. I'm sure they're not gonna insure that structure without it. I'm pretty positive. But we gotta find that out. I could be wrong, but I think we ought to be asking that question, Spiros, of the insurance industry, what is out there? That's different from the single-family home renting. It may not be the case, but I think we ought to understand at least what the practice is before we adopt a regulation that we really don't need. It's hard for the staff to enforce.
We're talking about two different things here now. We're talking, the question that I'm trying to get resolved here, okay, is should the ordinance require all short-term rentals to post summaries of applicable city regulations? What you're addressing is the insurance issue.
Well, only because you brought up how they're managed and you brought up smoke detectors.
I
So-
think our safeguard is yes. Ask them to post it. If they're responsible enough to do it, then they do it. If not, then, as John said, when the insurance claim comes through, the onus is on them. But we've asked them to do it, and I think that's the responsible thing to do.
Okay, I tend to agree with you, but let's go around here. You're yes, right? Shannon?
Yes, sir.
John?
Question is, should they post the rules and regulations?
Should they post summaries of the applicable city regulations?
Yes.
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 Yeah.
Yes.
Bob? John?
Go think about it. Come back for you.
All right. Jessica?
I don't have any problem with them posting the rules, but to answer your question, John, about what the insurance companies are doing with short-term rentals and really all rentals, the agent is responsible for doing the field underwriting to make sure that they have at working smoke detectors, working carbon monoxide detectors, that they don't have traditional wood fires, wood fire burning, the old ones used to have to feed in their house. They're responsible for doing all those stuff. Whether the individual agent is doing it is pretty unlikely. And then, so what insurance companies have now started doing really in the last 2 years is they're doing blind inspections where they're hiring a third-party firm to come out, drive by these houses, take incredibly detailed photos of them with drones, because that's how they get into the backyards without any issue. And of course, in the insurance contract buried somewhere, there's somewhere that says that we can do that. And then it's going back to the underwriters. The underwriters are determining based on just the exterior of the house if it's acceptable risk, and then they're flat canceling people like crazy. And it's actually a huge thing that's happening in the industry right now. But they're not, they're not going inside the houses. And honestly, there's only one other company I broker for that sometimes will ask for interior inspections, and that's very rare, and that's only if there's something on the exterior to warrant that. So,
Okay.
I'll be
All
with
right.
Jessica, I'll be a yes.
We got 9 yeses and 1 question.
I'll tell you how Jessica's saying yes, meaning that
Okay.
it's a
All
false
right.
sense of
So
security.
yes is the answer to that.
Yes, but-
All right, should short-term rentals be required to maintain $1 million of insurance coverage applicable to the short-term rental activity? Anybody got any comments before we go around the table? Jessica?
I think I think it's fine. The coverage is inexpensive. It's probably
Okay.
less than $100 a year, but it's,
Okay.
I think it is a false sense of security.
John?
Well, I want to come back because I always ask, how do we plan, not in the hypothetical, how do we plan to enforce that? I know how DMV does it, but how do we plan to do it?
Every time they come in to register or renew, we're gonna ask to see a copy.
So every 2 years, we know they have it. But DMV gets told when you cancel your insurance, because the insurance company notifies DMV and they send you a letter, and if you don't tell me another thing, turn your plates in.
Well, if
Well,
the
I'm-
city's an additional insured, you're gonna get the notification.
You get a certificate.
Well, this doesn't say that the city is an
I
additional
know, but I'm
insurer.
saying that was mentioned before, that the city would be an additional named insured. And if that's the case.
And I think while the CUP's every 2 years, I think the registration with the commissioners every year.
So they would have to come down and show they have it, and that it's paid in full, and it's not cancelable afterwards.
They wouldn't even have to come down. If they list the city as a certificate holder on the policy, you'll get a deck page annually.
I'm just, yeah, but, and also notified if they don't pay.
Right.
Okay, that's what I'm after. That all needs to be written down so people see that. Based on all of that it's self-enforcing electronic notification, so it's not an overhead function. That's good.
Bob?
Yes.
Barbara?
Yes.
I'm yes. Jim?
Yep.
Rosemary?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Shannon? All right, we got All right, should the ordinance prohibit short-term rentals from having amplified noise between 10 p.m. and 10 a.m.? Shannon? John?
Yes.
Rosemary? Jim? I'm yes.
Yes.
Barb?
Doesn't
Bob?
mean they've got to do it during the other time, so,
Yeah,
just to make that
it's a
plain.
pretty specific question, so.
Okay.
Here's a question I had from someone who called me because they watched our discussion last week when we just briefly touched on the subject. The difference between amplified being a radio and amplified being a band.
Yeah.
And I said, ooh, that is a big difference between amplified radio and amplified live music. There is a distinction in how loud it is. I don't know how many people have bands or if there's other things that require that. I don't know if we can look at that, but I think we need to, because that is a demonstrably different noise than someone plays a radio around their pool if they have a band in their backyard. So I don't know how, I just would like to have us look at that, look what other communities have done, but that is a distinction I hadn't thought of between, my back door neighbor has a pool and he plays music, he doesn't play it late, but if you had a band over there playing at 9 o'clock at night, you know, on 5 on his amplifier, that'd be a lot different than 5 on his radio.
Well, I mean, if he's got microphones and sound amplification for that band, if it's an electric guitar as opposed to an acoustic guitar, I believe we'd treat that as amplified. If it was an acoustic guitar, you know,
My distinction I'm making is not that I understand it's amplified, but there's a difference in when someone says you can have amplified music. There's a difference between having double Marshall stacks with 400 amplifiers in your backyard versus having your radio. And maybe we can't make that legal distinction. I'm just sharing with you feedback from a resident, making sure that we had contemplated the distinction between, I guess because they've experienced this, or they wouldn't be bringing it up.
But I take it your answer is yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
But we need to look into if their ability to distinguish between what, maybe we can't, but I'd just like to go back and tell her, no, we can't make that discrimination legally.
I think one thing I want to make that I think applies to that is this would be over and above the already applicable noise ordinance. So if somebody was out there with a band, with a drum stack and everything else, they might not violate this zoning regulation, but they still might be in violation of the noise ordinance, and we would look at enforcing that way if that was the
Okay.
issue to come up.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much for listening to
Jessica?
residents' concern.
Should the ordinance explicitly require that trash be placed in automated bins with private Saturday pickup in Sandbridge and it's got a parentheses here with private Saturday pickup in Sandbridge?
The reason that comes up is we saw lots of photographs of the black bins with multiple bags stacked all around them. And this is just to make clear that if you can't get it in the black bin, you, the owner, have to deal with it on your own. You can't litter the entire front of your house with trash bags.
So it's the
Didn't we
black
adopt
bin, oh, I'm sorry, John.
No, good. Go
I
ahead.
was just say, so it's the black bin and then any extra goes into a special bin? Just another black bin?
Well, if you gotta get another black
just take
bin,
care
or
of
if you've gotta hire a private vendor to haul your trash away.
I guess, what does automated mean? Like,
That's the black bin.
okay, that's what I wanted.
That's the
But
black
didn't we
bin.
pass an ordinance not too long ago to close what we thought was a loophole in our existing ordinances relative to the black cans? Didn't we do that I thought we talked about that. I thought we knew we had this problem with people putting up bags because it wasn't actually illegal under our ordinances. There was a loophole. Something about that.
I
I
don't
know I
believe
wasn't
we've
dreaming
taken
that.
action on that.
No, I think we passed something that made sure that you can't stack bags, just white bags laying around at the can. They had to all be in a can.
Correct.
And that's kind of the emphasis here, that we wanna prevent them from throwing bags all around the trash cans. We want it to be all in automated so we can pick it up. And then the accentuation here is, if you wait until a Tuesday pickup in Sandbridge and they all rotate out on a Saturday or a Sunday, that trash pile is pretty immense after a week's visitation. And so having that as a requirement for a rental being picked up on the Saturday is pretty important to cleanliness at the beach.
Okay, so I'm gonna make sure I understand this, because I'm just a little slow maybe. So, at Sandbridge, it talks about that there will be a second weekly pickup, which will be private. The other times is public, but it'll almost be in a black can. So now let's roll down to the issue that Ms. Henley brought up. It's the Lagomar with the bus out front, you know, and they got 40 people there, and, you know, or maybe they have something in between. So now they're generating a like amount of trash because they have a like amount of volume. So that is not going to have this Saturday pickup, correct?
Right?
Okay, I'm just trying to understand I understand the sanitation issue. I'm right with you, City Manager, about public sanitation. I'm just trying to understand about, as you go this, how we, you know, they buy, you know, like my next door neighbor has 3 trash cans and one has 4. So you can keep buying those black cans. You have like 8 of them out there. I know a church that has at least that many that goes out every time the trash comes picked up. I'm just trying to understand that their position is they just have to keep buying enough black cans to match their outflow.
Right.
Okay.
And the reason for the Sandbridge special, you didn't ask me this, but I hope you don't mind if I
Oh, please,
articulate.
amplify.
The reason that the Sandbridge private sand pickup it matters and needs to be in here is because, as you know, the ordinance requires you can't put your trash can out before, well, everybody, the rule's observed in its violation, but it's not supposed to be up before 7 o'clock the day of your pickup. This would enable them to go ahead and have their trash out on their trash day and also for private pickup on that other day. That's why that's
Okay, just
separately
want to make
called
sure I
out.
understand what
And that's
people
what they
can
do now.
expect in
Oh.
terms of.
We're not running private pickup.
No. It's a private hauler.
Sandbridge does this now.
Okay, I
Private
understand,
hauler.
I understand.
They have Saturday to Saturday runs.
Okay.
Okay, next. Sounds like we're yes on that. Should the ordinance explicitly require that trash be placed in automated bins with private Saturday pickup in Sandbridge?
Yes.
Everybody okay on that one?
Now I understand.
But I have a question there.
Yes?
If you're going to allow a short-term rental in the north end, or you allow it in an overlay district, why would you think the trash collection in those areas be any different than in Sandbridge?
That was the point I was making, just more cans.
And I would be very apprehensive as your city manager to allow others to have short-term rentals in different locations without having a Saturday pickup at their location too, to prevent the same, trash blowing, rats, accumulation. So if you're gonna go down that road, why wouldn't you be required to have a Saturday pickup at that location?
Well, maybe if you create other overlays, you do that, but the reason that Sandbridge is different is because there's an accumulation of these properties along what can be classified as a route, and so they've already got it set up. I mean, I don't think it would prohibit you from creating that in other areas if they ask for it.
All right, we got two other council people here. John?
I mean, I think it comes down to an operational issue. Comes down to an operational issue for the rentals. So I think, but in other words, for Sandbridge, they're doing it because they can't go in and have the next week start and there's no capacity for them to get rid of their trash. I mean, they're not gonna be charging somebody to do that. So I think from our perspective, I don't know that we need to be saying exactly how they need to manage that issue or when it has to be picked up, but that it can't be in the public right, or in the public view. So you can't just put garbage out in your front yard, and you can't expect the city to pick it up unless it's in a can that is something that fits our system. But in terms of regulating when it has to be picked up, I think that's probably, outside of our realm.
Barbara?
But we could just require, if we do other overlay districts, that they provide a special pickup at an appropriate day, depending on, when they're regular. I mean, that just could be something, as we approve further overlay districts, that we make that requirement, that there be a special pickup midway, halfway beyond whatever their pickup. I know Saturday is the right time at Sandbridge because Tuesday is the pickup day, so, but we could just require that.
Can we do that based upon the number of short-term rentals that end up in that overlay district? Because if somebody comes in, as we said last week with the idea that they want to do that, so then that would initiate us to look at that overlay district. And if there's only one house in that neighborhood that has it, it seems pointless to send a truck out a second time during that week to do that. It just seems,
Overlay districts with just one house, that's,
I mean, that's what we said last week, if I'm not mistaken, that would trigger us to rule whether or not that was allowed in that particular area. So if that happened, in theory, I guess it could. It seems maybe there needs to be a certain number of residences that do it before we require a second.
John?
Well, we're not we're not gonna be sending city trucks out for these additional pickups. So, I mean, they'll have to figure out, if that's where.
We're just not gonna be citing them for having trash cans on the street on Saturday because we understand why they're there. That's all we were trying to get here.
Yeah.
And if, if a private property owner and their agent wants to deal with it by buying the third and the fourth and the fifth can, then they can. Or if they wanna hire somebody to come out and just pick it up from the driveway, not in the public right-of-way, they can. And if a street came in and said, look, everybody on our street's doing this, and we wanna be able to have a separate private pickup on Thursdays, I think that we would probably work to facilitate that. So I think it can be addressed within the scope of what we've got here if council agrees.
With John, let the market drive it.
So is the answer,
Don't let it be
are
in
you
somebody's front
suggesting
yard.
that we
Pile up
don't
a
need
bunch
to
of
do it?
stuff.
Or-
No, what I was suggesting was that this, as written, satisfies the current need if council agrees.
Yeah, okay. All right, Shannon?
With the way it's written here, sure, yes,
Yeah,
sir.
John?
I think I am. So, but we're not telling them how they've got to do it. They just can't put the garbage in the front yard,
Right.
and they've got to,
Yeah.
for the days that it's the city's responsibility to pick up, it's got to be in an approved container. Is that correct? Yes. I'm agree, yes.
Rosemary?
Yes.
Jim? I'm okay. Barbara?
yes.
Bob? John? Jessica?
Yep.
Okay. Should the ordinance require that a point of contact be identified who can be present at the short-term rental within 30 minutes?
That's ridiculous.
Too short.
Bob, you have a comment?
The only thing I'm concerned about, is how many are gonna be responsible? Is this gonna be practical? Is it gonna be enforceable? Because what happens if the designated agent is out of town on vacation or,
Somebody to cover
Designate
for
yeah,
somebody else.
somebody's gotta cover, but I'm
Somebody
just
else.
saying.
Get a substitute.
Yeah.
30 minutes.
They're probably gonna have to supply a second name and phone number.
But I'm
minutes is
just
too
saying
short.
that, I
Can't go
think
with
that was,
that.
That's easy enough to do.
Yeah.
yeah, just a thought.
All right, Jessica?
I don't know how we enforce it,
Yeah,
but sure, I'm fine.
okay. John?
I'm not, you can't, show me where you can get the city in 30 minutes. 30 minutes it takes to drive from my house at Wichita Point, which is 26 miles, to my mother-in-law's place at Sandbridge, 2945 South Sand Fiddler. It's 45 minutes on a good day. So I just think, unless you're getting calls at midnight so you can get anywhere in 30 minutes, I just think it's not a realistic transit time. And I just think it lacks common sense. So for 30 minutes, no.
Even if it's 45 minutes, is there gonna be somebody, who's timing it?
Well, I understand that
Person
aspect,
calling for
but
help.
someone is always gonna wanna say, hey, you did this, and you did this, and they're gonna time for the time that they called, the time that they were notified, and you didn't show up, and somebody, where were you? No, I couldn't get from College Park over to Chicks Beach in 30 minutes, and I think that's not, so I think it takes, you say, by the time you get a call and say, oops, I'm instantly, like I'm at the fire station, I dropped everything I did, jumped right in my car and drove out, rather than saying, oh, I gotta make sure someone's, I think an hour is the least amount of time it should be in the city of our size and where people live. I just don't think 30 minutes is realistic,
I don't disagree with you.
even if you can enforce it. But don't set an expectation
All right,
to
well,
people
okay,
that
wait a minute.
they're gonna get instant response when they're not.
All right, John?
I think that this is one of the most important regulations that we've added here, and we could talk about the time component of it. But one thing that we haven't talked about is what triggers the need for someone to come out.
Yeah.
So, if you've got a neighbor that is maybe hypersensitive to something, then they may be calling frequently for something that really is maybe not a big issue. Or you may have a big issue that somebody needs to be there right away. And so, you know, we don't want to have this ambiguity where, you know, if you've got a neighbor who's upset at you, every time they want to ding you, they can just pick up the phone and you've got to actually get in your car and be there within 30 minutes or 45 minutes or an hour, or whatever ultimately we do. So I'm not coming with a solution to that question, Mr. Mayor, but it's silent in terms of what we've discussed so far as to what actually triggers the necessity for that trip. But I think I really do think it is maybe the most important thing that we've talked about in terms of rules. But I just wanted to muddy
you
the
go
waters
along
even
with
more
an
there,
hour?
Mr. Mayor.
Well, let's see, I think
Well,
Mark was
yeah,
gonna
hours,
say
I
something.
mean, fine. I don't know if, I mean, that's a long time for somebody to have no relief, though. But I mean, but we also don't want to set something that's unrealistic, and so somebody, you know, and if somebody, let's say we set it at 45 minutes, what happens if somebody shows up on the 46th minute? I mean, are they tardy, and do they get now a demerit against?
Hopefully somebody's gonna use some common sense.
Oh, yeah,
so,
yeah,
I mean,
we'd
yeah,
hope.
so-
I had a citizen just text me and they said, why not miles instead of minutes?
Beg pardon?
I had a citizen just text me and say, why not do miles instead of minutes? They have to be 10 miles away or 20 miles away versus 30 minutes or 60 minutes.
I don't know how you'd,
They have to register the address of where that person resides.
Well, if you're trying to create a new industry, make it 10 minutes, and you have to hire someone who's located close to
Mark,
you.
did you have a comment?
Again, and maybe I'm sorry to keep speaking, but the intent behind this was not necessarily that the person has to get in the car and get there, but rather it was so that if there was a complaint, the owner or the representative of the owner was put in the first position to try to help resolve that complaint. It doesn't actually say that the person has to go. It says that there has to be somebody that we can call who can, if necessary, reasonably get there. If they choose not to go or make any effort to resolve it, then it's back to city enforcement. If it's a noise complaint, then the next call goes to the police department to go out there. If it's a fireworks on the beach, whatever it is, this was just designed to try to take away some of that enforcement effort of city staff, move it back over to the property owner or the property owner's agent, and require them to give us a name of somebody who we could call that wasn't in Kansas.
Then I think it ought to say that explicitly, this does not require the person contacted to actually physically go to the property. So it's clear what that means. You'd say, I can call, I can go there or not, but to take action is what I think that's what John was after, taking action, but we don't want to set the expectation that the person who's calling think the owner's gonna show up or representative's gonna show up at the property, because that's how I took it.
Can I dumb this down? So for example, I'm staying in an Airbnb and I'm playing my music really loud. The person could complain, it would kick back to whoever the representative is, and they could just simply call me and say, hey, you're being a nuisance.
Turn it down.
And if it's resolved,
Then it's
then we're
resolved.
done.
We're done.
Okay. I think 30 minutes then is fine.
Yeah, but I just think it
So-
needs to say not meaning going.
30
Can
minutes still
respond to the
good?
complaint.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, but I think it needs to be clear, it doesn't require the people to go to the property.
All right, everybody okay with
Action
30
can be
minutes then,
taken.
with that understanding? Yes, Barbara?
Instead of saying be present, just say who can respond to the
Who can
complaint.
respond?
Or
I
resolved.
believe that may be actually how it's actually worded in the ordinance,
Okay, who
available
can
to respond
to the
to the
complaint.
complaint.
But how people hear that is different than how you.
That's the way I
Okay,
took it too.
so it's gonna be respond within 30 minutes, okay?
And that's fair.
That's
I mean,
fair.
somebody should be able to answer the phone in 30
All
minutes.
right. Next question, should the ordinance provide that a special events permit must be obtained for any event with an attendance of over 50 people and with a maximum attendance of 100 with a limit of 3 permits per property per year?
This is one of the few regulations that seem to get a good bit of support throughout all the processes, I believe.
Well, I'm really torn on it because I had my wedding at my parents' house and there were 50 people there. And I don't want to see people who are not doing short-term rentals this being misconstrued, because I feel like that's what's gonna happen. I mean, if I'm my parents' neighbor and I'm having my kid's wedding in their backyard or a birthday party or any kind of party, and they call, will this not trigger some response?
The ordinance as written is pretty clear that it is it applies to a rental and not to
Right.
Private residence.
private residential use.
But on the flip side of that, 50 people is a lot of people. I don't know. I have really mixed feelings on it because I can see going and renting a place to have a small wedding, and I did it to save money. It was great, and it was quiet, and we weren't rowdy, and I'm sure if it was at a short-term rental, nobody would have said anything. But 50 people, I mean, that's a lot of cars on a street. I don't know. I'm really mixed
That's
about
why
it.
the permit
That's why the
requirement would
permits-
require.
Yeah, that's what the special permits people review, is whether or not it can handle that. Because when you go down to the special permits office, they've got a form and you fill it out and you tell people where you're gonna park and all this stuff, so that's what the permit does.
But if you're at 49, you don't need a permit, right?
That's probably gonna be the loophole, but everything's got a loophole, I guess.
And does 49 count every single person in the property, or is it just, the 5 people that are in my family are exempt from the 50 people? Is it 50 guests? Is it,
50 people on the property.
okay.
All right, everybody understand the question, except for Ben.
Just say,
And the
Ben's a
question,
yes.
the question,
'Cause he's
Ben,
positive.
is should the ordinance provide that a special events permit must be obtained for any event with an attendance of over 50 people and with a maximum attendance of 100, with a limit of 3 permits per property per year? That's the question we're dealing with now. Shannon?
Yes.
Yeah. John?
Yes.
Yes.
Mary?
yes.
I'm yes.
Yes.
Barb? Bob? John?
Question for the city attorney, do we have to have a legislative basis to rely upon to distinguish how we said 3 versus 1 versus 8? Are we immune from having to provide a justification for the number of limitation that we impose?
I think you have to have some justification, but that has been the historic practice, and it has, I'm sorry, Kay?
There was a zoning determination that 3 of those would be allowed in Sandbridge before they would need conditional use permit. That's why we use.
Because they view that anything beyond 3 would constitute a congregate assembly use.
Yes, I just want to make sure it's
Ben?
legally defensible.
Jessica?
Yes.
Okay. All right, should the ordinance provide that a sign of up to 4 square feet be permitted at each property? Jessica?
I don't care about this one.
Okay.
Yes.
My question is, I thought we aren't able to control content, and people can put a 4-foot sign on their property even now. They can put a political sign up 365 days a year, so if we can't regulate content, which we've been told we can't, and you can already have a 4-by-4-foot sign in your residential neighborhood, do we have to have this to allow them to have this sign? I'm just asking the question.
You have an ordinance right now that limits the size of signs in residential properties, and this is bigger,
4x4?
is bigger.
How come that when people put up these political signs, they don't get and they're 4x4 and they're residential?
They're 4x4s.
No, I've seen some.
4 feet,
Yeah, I
4
know.
square feet,
I don't, but my point is, we don't allow 4 square feet,
4 square feet.
but don't we allow people to put a real estate sign in their yard? I just thought, we were just told that we can't regulate the content of signs.
Right.
So if people have a size, no matter what's on the content, it can be out there all the time.
Well, I don't
So-
think real estate signs are 4x4s.
No, but you said it's 4 square feet, so
This
it's
says 4 square
2x2.
feet, it's 2 by
4
2.
square.
Oh,
Fine.
okay.
So my only point is, if you can have those kind of signs and then a political sign in your yard all the time, this is just another content. Do we even need the regulation is what I'm asking? Because people can have a sign.
I thought that the size requirement was smaller. Am I wrong about that, Kevin or Kay?
No, the sign requirement would be one by one, and so the realtors asked that they be allowed 2 square feet, 4 square feet, 2 by 2, because that's what they already have in Sandbridge. We don't tell them what they can put on the sign, we simply say they're permitted a sign.
That's the prohibition, is we can't determine based on content.
Correct. All right.
All right, Barbara?
Didn't we have some other wording that allowed a sign that somebody names their house something or other, that would be an exemption or an exception? I thought there was some other wording that we had also included other than this.
There was a discussion of that, Kevin or Kay.
Yes, we were not going to count, I think we called them, house signs or identification signs, the blue marlin, because they're huge across the front of the houses. Those kinds of signs, we're not gonna count in your, 4 square feet.
We're effectively not treating those as signs.
We're not treating them as signs.
So anybody who's got something special like that, for that reason, since those are exempt, I think that any sign that's advertising the business should be just what's in a residential, which is 1 by 1. I would not be in favor of this. But we are allowing those name signs.
All right, Jim?
But aren't these the same size as real estate signs? Isn't that the whole purpose?
We were told that the real estate signs were 2 by 2.
Yeah, so I'm saying, the standard for renter for sale sign that you see in somebody's yard is approximately this size, okay, so.
All right. Jessica, where are you?
I don't think we need this, but I'm fine with it.
Fine, okay. All right, Ben,
Yes.
John,
No, because we don't need it.
Bob, yeah, Barbara,
Oh, I think it should be the residential requirement.
are you yes or no?
No,
No. Okay. All right, I'm yes.
Yes.
Jim?
Yes,
Rosemary?
yes.
John?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Should the ordinance require a fire extinguisher and where natural gas service is present, carbon monoxide detectors be installed in each short-term rental? Jim?
Do we already have the smoke detector addressed somewhere else?
Not that I'm aware of.
All right, well, that needs to be, in my opinion, smoke detector, interconnect the smoke detector and CO where it's required.
Interconnected, that means hardwired when you say that?
It doesn't have to be hardwired.
Okay, just you said interconnected, that's what.
Interconnected means they communicate with each other. There's wireless versions of that.
All right, everybody understand that? Shannon?
Well, Mr. Wood is suggesting another requirement, if I understood him correctly.
No, just to modify this one. Because, why would you have a carbon monoxide detector and not a smoke detector?
Okay.
They don't have to talk to each other.
Yeah, carbon monoxide detector, you only need, I think, one on each floor.
Okay, so you're,
I think I've got to look at that.
so you want to require smoke detector,
I can't imagine I'd stay in a place that didn't have one.
Interconnected smoke detectors.
If I walked in this.
interconnected.
What does interconnected mean?
In other words, when one goes off, they all go off, so if it's down the hall.
You have to be hardwired.
Okay,
They've got Wi-Fi version, or
Makes
wireless
sense.
versions, yeah.
Shannon?
So we're asking if fire, or smoke detector and carbon monoxide detector.
Basically, yeah.
Yes, sir.
All right, John?
Yes.
Rosemary?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
I'm okay. Barbara?
yes.
Bob? John?
I gotta think about it. I'm still struggling with the enforcement of these things. I just don't understand. No, insurance companies are gonna make people have these things. When people buy homes, they have it. Carbon monoxide, who's going around and make sure the battery's been maintained on the things? Who's pushing all this stuff? So you're gonna say yes, so then someone's gonna say, okay, you put it in there. And then someone's gonna say, oh, well, I assume I'm safe, and then they're not. Then someone's gonna say, well, you made them have this. How come you don't have a policy to oversight to make sure that they're working? Because we do check the ones in hotels.
Or it turns the liability over to them.
Right, but if you don't have one, they have the liability too. That's my only point is, what's the purpose? And so it sounds like, oh, I'm against having smoke detectors in people's homes, when it's really about, no, I'm against giving people a false sense of security. And there is a difference. So I'm gonna say yes, but it doesn't mean anything. That bothers me. It
Yes.
really bothers me.
Jim?
And this, I don't know if Andy Friedman's here or not, but would these be treated as traditional rental properties, so they would be inspected by Department of Housing, which is going to go check and make sure there's smoke detectors, which is gonna check to make sure there's CO detectors, which is gonna make sure that when they push the button every 2 years that they work. Is that part of it?
I don't understand that to be part of it, but I'm not.
I didn't
I mean,
either.
are they going to be, because if they're rental properties, then they would go through that process.
It's not my intent to do that at this time.
I understand, but if they're rental properties, then I think under the other section of the code, I don't think it specifies long or short-term rentals. I mean, that would be a question that we need to look at.
The rental inspection program is only in certain areas of the city. So it would not be all rental in the city, just in certain areas. And I can't recall exactly what it says, but we'll pull it for you and give you a copy.
What determines whether a section of the city qualifies for that?
That was determined by city council many years ago.
Because I mean, I've leased several houses, and every house I've lived in, somebody knocks on my door, actually annually, and says, "I need to check your smoke detectors."
Yeah.
So
Yes, they do those inspections every year.
I'd like to know how we're selecting who's underneath that. I mean, that's another question,
There's
but
a whole process
Yeah,
in
yeah.
the state code.
I'd be interested in that.
I'm a
All right.
yes.
You okay?
Yes.
Jessica?
I'm a yes, but I'm with Jim and John. I think we should find out if they fall under the state guideline too.
All right, should registration and the payment of tax be required?
I almost didn't put that one in there, but I, just for the sense of completeness.
Shannon?
Well, we're grandfathering people in that are registered, so I would assume yes.
Yeah. All right, John?
Yes.
Yes.
Rosemary? Yeah. Jim? I'm okay. Barbara? Bob? John?
Yes.
Ben?
Yes, sir.
Jessica? Okay.
So, Mr. Mayor, you're an hour in, and you're now getting to the three that are actually challenging.
Yeah.
Motion to adjourn.
Why are you laughing?
What do we have to do?
Okay, well, we got 5 minutes, folks. What should be the maximum occupancy
Good luck with that.
of the STR? 2 bedrooms plus 2, 3 bedrooms plus 2, or some other?
I think it should be based on square footage.
Beg pardon?
I think we should go based on square footage, not number of bedrooms.
Yeah.
I don't have any other comment other than that. I just think it should be based on square footage.
All right, Barbara?
Well, I think going by codes is important, and I think we do have a requirement that there be a certain number of square feet in a bedroom, depending on the occupancy. And I know that's what inspections look for when they're inspecting those things. So I agree. I think just to blanket say 3 per bedroom, when a bedroom could be very, very small, I think we ought to stick with the state code, which I think pretty much hits the 2 per bedroom. I think that's the industry standard.
Jim?
I think the square footage thing makes a good bit of sense. I don't know where that ends up with, but I think that it might be prudent to skip this one and ask the staff if they can come up with the data on the square footage and what it would be, because I don't know if a 10 by 12 bedroom should be 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, and I have no idea. I mean,
Correct me, I'm sorry.
No, I haven't been recognized yet.
All right, the suggestion is that we go by the state code.
my suggestion is for the staff to come back with a recommendation on that we can look at, just to see what the code says.
All right, John, do you have a
Yeah, I
comment?
just want an observation. I think I'm not saying it's good, better, and different, but we can't ignore the fact that people built a business model, specifically at Sandbridge, on a certain type of occupancy. Good, better, and different. You know, time machines, I don't own one, so I can't go back in time. But people have predicated an income stream and made investments and done other things. And so when you were looking at all these other criteria, you have to be mindful of, is there a deleterious effect that you didn't, unintended consequence of your choice that undermines the business proposition that goes with those? Now, you may consciously say that the public policy prevails, and that's an economic impact that's worthwhile given the public gain, but we got to be knowledgeable and understand what that translates to in terms of the income stream to properties wherever they're at in the city, what that might mean to their evaluation, and understand if we are injecting instability, that we are, and we think the public benefit from whatever rule we adopt makes sense. I'm just, make sure we are mindful of the fiscal impact on homeowners, since we've decided to go forward with having these and potentially citywide, that we be cognizant of people who've already been having a certain level of practice that we've accepted, and they built a model based upon something that we have accepted. Good, better, and different, but unconsciously we have.
All right, Barbara?
Well, I don't know that we accepted it, because all of the building permits said that they were single-family residences. And I think they were residential, not commercial, so I'm not worried about a business model because they were supposed to be residential. I think the fact that we're applying this in all residential areas, I really think we need to look at the state code and have some real strong basis for what we approve.
All right.
Can I get
Yes, we are.
clarification?
These are-
You-
Everything we're doing is residential.
You have a comment?
I had a question. Are we talking about the statewide building code for residential structures?
Well, I think there's a requirement that you have a certain number of square feet per bed in a bedroom. And I think that's what we need to look at.
Shannon?
I think the age or the size of the person, if you will, I mean, Jessica's baby is not gonna take up the space that I take up, so her baby taking up one of these heads just doesn't make sense to me. So I'm thinking if you're a family traveling and you've got 3 young kids, that 2 per bedroom, it doesn't make as much sense. If I came with 3 adults, that's one thing, but 3 toddlers is another. I think that needs to come into play somehow or the other, because we're talking about vacationers here, not typically all partiers, so we've got to figure out the kid equation.
Bob?
Yeah, along the line of what Shannon said, and also about what Jim said about, with the discussion about square footage, a lot of times, multiple families will rent these homes, because, they can go anywhere from $6,000 to, $10,000 a week sometimes, in terms of actual cost. A lot more than that. For some of these, I've seen some homes with indoor bowling alleys and movie theaters, but a lot of times if they come down with the kids, it's usually adults wind up in the rooms, and the kids wind up on the couches, on the floors, and it's almost like camping. So it's not unusual to have 4 families, chip in and go to these places. So I just think we got to be careful with some of the restrictions.
All right, Jim?
Well, so the other issue, though, is, and this kind of goes back to some of this other stuff, is what's defined as a bedroom, because you have specific requirements for egress in terms of windows or an exterior door. You clearly have the smoke detector requirement in the code, so, I think that's got to be a component of it too. Just because you have an extra room, you converted your garage or you've converted your attic, that's not a bedroom.
Okay, we're gonna get some information back from what the code says before we make that decision, okay?
Please, thank you.
What should be the permissible number of rental contracts per consecutive 7-day period? Anybody want to make any comments before we go around the table?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think this is the least enforceable part of all of this.
7 days.
Because if my vacation starts on Saturday and yours starts on Sunday and yours starts on Wednesday, how do you determine how many rentals there's been in that week? I just don't.
It's not a week.
I don't
Yes.
think that's enforceable.
Is there something prohibiting us from going to like a straight so many rentals per month?
Or per year?
Or, because
Other jurisdictions are doing it that way.
I-
So many days per year.
I feel like that makes more sense, because in the heaviest rental time is gonna be in the summer, and I'm gonna wanna pack as much income into that period as I can. Why, I mean, I don't, and on the flip side of that is, I don't think doing a 7-day period I think it's gonna lead to a lot of confusion.
I don't think there's any difference between a multifamily or a single family.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I don't think we should distinguish between a multifamily and a single family. I don't think it should matter.
Well, the reason that was put in there was at former Mayor Sessoms' request, based upon his discussions with our representatives of the real estate agents, brokers for these properties. They indicated that while the larger houses, and I'm not advocating for it or against it, I'm just explaining where it came from. They indicated that in the multifamily that they would have, in the wintertime when the kids were in school, they could still rent smaller spaces to people who were getting away for a weekend. Whereas the larger, single family with the multiple bedrooms and everything it wasn't as important for them. So that's why it was in there, because some people insisted that, originally it was an insistence that everybody needed two, but then, I think leadership
Everybody too, it shouldn't
I think
matter.
leadership in the North End suggested that they wanted an overlay, but only if it was one, so we were trying to strike a compromise.
Yes, John.
This gets back when someone says, multiple year compress it. If you're in a single, since we decided to allow, or so far the tendency, that anywhere in the city subject to CUP, conditional use permit, you could have one of these. So let's say you are in Fairfield, or you're in Bellevue Manor, or you're in Strawbridge, and now someone got a conditional use permit, and they decide they're gonna use or whatever it is, all in the summertime, and now in your cul-de-sac of your neighborhood, you now have not just once a week maybe, but now they're renting them by the day. You might have a different view versus where it may be someplace where it's traditionally been, like at Sandbridge and other places, traditionally you're doing all the rentals. And this is why I'm saying you really can't disconnect some of these issues from this conditional use permit, because we're gonna have to have some kind of criteria that ultimately we say we're gonna judge these by. So when you're thinking about how many you allow and how you're gonna define by the week, it isn't just these places where it's been the traditional use. It's gonna be in these places where it hasn't been the traditional use, and you are really fundamentally making a change. And and some people out there in the hitherlands, they're not thinking about that because it isn't happening where they live now. But where it is happening, like in Bay Lake Pines, they've been letting us know they don't like it. Or some have often said they want to keep it, so we gotta have balance. But my point is, it's a contentious issue, so I think you gotta make sure you're thinking of some of these things. Remember, how you're gonna handle this with the conditional use permit, because that's citywide, for all the places that are not an overlay.
What about,
So we're back to the issue of, do we want to limit it to 1 per 7-day period? Do we want to say 2 per 7-day period, or what do we want to do? So, yes, Barbara.
Could we look at some of these ordinances that do it by, I think you said that some other places are doing it in
Annually.
the state, maybe how many a year or so forth? Could we see some of that? Because I don't think we've really considered that.
Well, I mean, it's ironic that today in Northern Virginia, Fairfax County is also considering their short-term rental ordinance. Now, theirs is much different than yours. I mean, theirs, you're limited to 4 adult lodgers, period. Every one of those lodgers has to be on the contract. No one else can be on the property but the 4 people who are on the contract. And I think they limit it, I think they limit it to, it was originally 45 days a year, but I think there was a recommendation for a change of that by the Planning Commission. So we should have some idea next week what they did. But I don't know that, I mean, I think you can choose any number you want, but I don't know that we're going to find a lot of guidance, because everybody that you talk to about this issue around the state says, well, this is what we do, but Virginia Beach is a tourist destination, and they're different. And I don't know.
Well, Lexington, that was pretty much handled by the General Assembly. It'd be awfully good to look at that, because that one was approved. I think they have a 7-person maximum also. But, all of these other places are much more stringent. We're talking about being very liberal in the things that we're talking about. And I really would like to see, maybe before we come back and do this again, what these other places in the state of Virginia are doing, like Northern Virginia, like Lexington, and so forth, because, I think we're being extremely liberal.
And can't we
And we
do,
do have to think of our residential neighborhoods, not just the tourist areas, because in an overlay district, that's, but, and of course, these regulations will apply to all of those, and that makes it pretty difficult. But we're talking about our residential neighborhoods. I think we have to remember that.
and can't we, if we go to this overlay, though it's more difficult, we can have differing regulations for the different overlay districts, can we not? I think you told us last Tuesday that we could.
But you could have a north end instead
You
of,
don't want to.
I'm not really in a position where I'd recommend that, but if you make the appropriate findings, you can.
Well, my example, if you say, what's been the practice at Sandbridge, and said that's 2 per week or 3 per week, then you say, hey, the people at North Beach, where there traditionally has been the 1 week, the kind of the, when you look at the zoning ordinance written, what I'm just trying to say is sometimes you gotta, you have to have a legislative basis, I understand that, but I'm just trying to say is it is something that one size doesn't have to fit all, because in the end, I think we always, and Barbara's right, we gotta remember in the end, we've got 1,000-something neighborhoods. We don't want to adopt a set of rules for a small number of neighborhoods and impose, what they might perceive as a virus on the other, 995 neighborhoods. We've got to be careful about that. And I'm just trying to make sure that we can find a sweet spot. I'd like to find it.
The only limitation you have, but it is a significant limitation, is what's called the uniformity requirement. And so, all of your R5 in the city has to have the exact same regulations. When you do overlays, if you're gonna call everything an STR overlay, and you do nothing more, then each one of those overlays is now like its own zoning classification, and uniformity should apply. So you're gonna have to call these things other than just the short-term overlay district. You're gonna have to make findings, and you're gonna have to show why you used your legislative discretion to impose this set of regulations on this activity in this part of the city, but you regulated that same activity differently in another portion of the city. And I will tell you, I think that no matter how hard you try, you end up getting challenged on that, and we'll try to make sure you have really good findings, but I appreciate the
So why don't
challenge.
we say unless you're in an overlay district, you're outside of an overlay district, no more than 1 a week. No more traditional.
Well, if you're outside of an overlay district, then you're gonna be coming in on a CUP, and you can tell them what you're gonna tell them on the CUP.
Just you have to be consistent.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same thing that it was the same argument or the same discussion you and I were just having. You have to be able to say, this is why I chose what I chose in the case of that CUP.
Okay, Jim, do you have an opinion on this?
Yeah, I think it's, as I said, I think it's completely unenforceable, and I don't know the solution to this.
Rosemary?
I think if it's outside of an overlay district, it's 1. If it's in an overlay district, it's 2.
So, one per week outside of an overlay district, and in an overlay district, 2 per week, okay? John?
I don't know where I am on this.
I'm sorry?
I don't know where I am on this right now.
All right, Shannon?
Shoot me, but I'm gonna say 2.
2? Jessica?
I don't know where I am either.
Ben?
I'd like to explore the annual idea, have a set number of renters annually.
All right.
They can distribute those however they want, but I don't know what that number is.
John?
I'm with John and Shannon. I want to protect the neighborhoods, and I don't think we have the right answer to, I'm not willing to take a position.
Bob?
Yeah, I think it's important to protect the neighborhoods, but I think it's also important to realize that this is 2 phases. It's an industry where a lot of people, own multiple homes and everything, and also some people, their individual homes making money. I just have a problem telling people, restricting people's business. So I that's where I stand now. It's very
All
confusing.
right, Barbara?
Well, I don't have restricted business in a residential neighborhood. I think our residential neighborhoods are residential. If they want to do a business, they go to a commercial area. But I really think we have to respect residential, and I can't think that it should be any more than 1 per week, and it may turn out if we did something annually, it would be less than that.
All right.
But it could be more than that if you did it annually, because if they didn't do anything in the
I mean, if we were
winter.
to set an
you know?
annual time, I certainly wouldn't want it to be more than 1 a week.
I see.
All right, we're not going to resolve this issue tonight, so it doesn't look like. Yes,
Mr. Mayor,
John?
one thing before we put a bow on it for today, though, is that you know, to Jim's point about the enforceability, you know, you do have an occupancy tax that is collected that actually is going to identify for each property how many nights that were rented. It will not tell you how many renters they had, it won't tell you the turnover, but that is something that's verifiable.
It's not gonna identify the number of nights, it's gonna identify the income.
No, it'll, because you pay $1 per room night as well. So,
doing that?
or $2 per room night. So, so we will have the data that will do it. So I could go and say, you know, 456 Main Street was rented this many times last year. So, and that's one of the things I'm wrestling with all of these is what is the ultimate enforceability of them. And so, and I don't know that that's where I'm gonna land, but I mean, that may be something that if we have an ordinance that we can actually verify, because Jim's correct. I mean, you start splitting up the week, and my week runs from, you know, Sunday to Saturday this week, and then you know, I don't have anybody, so now it's gonna run Friday through. I mean, you start playing that game, and is it fair for us to say what that week should be? You know, because it depends, so. Anyway, I would like to get some more information on what other municipalities have done to that, but that may be one that we can actually at least audit and verify.
Yes, Jessica.
Can we find that information out now on the existing short-term rentals? I mean, I'd like to have that as a part of the conversation, so maybe we can derive a better estimate on what should be the rental per week or per month or per year based on what's already happening.
All right, I like what Rosemary said, to be honest with you. I think, you know, in the overlay districts 2 and outside 1, but I thought that was a good suggestion. I think we've about run out of our time we can spend on this week, so we'll have to come back again.
Oh, great.
And deal with it. So we
When
can
it doesn't get shorter, it's a discussion on short-term rentals.
move back to the agenda. Mr. City Manager, you have Chief Severa here, I believe.
Sir, we do. So, we're going to commence city manager's briefings, and we'll begin with the police department's mid-year report. And Chief Severa, Jim Severa is here with us today.
Welcome, Chief.
Thank you, sir. Wait a second for everyone to get seated. We're going to need that seat.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Mr. Mayor, Mr. Vice Mayor, members of council, Mr. Hanson, Mr. Stiles, Mr. Cover, he was here, Mr. Williams. As soon as we get this going, we will have our update, mid-year update. I was at a meeting today with school superintendent, members of school administration, and we're talking about school safety, and they made their presentation during this morning. And I was asked on the side about our budget, and I said the budget for the police department is just north of $100 million. And someone had commented it costs that much to run the police department, and we don't feel it's a cost. We feel that your police department is an investment in the future of the city, future of our schools, future of economic development, a future of our young folks who are coming up. So that's why we say that police agencies are an investment in the future. You'll notice every time I do a presentation, John Gandy is usually assisting me. Well, John Gandy has been promoted to captain as of July 5th, and I wanted to make that announcement to the body today. So, John, go ahead.
Congratulations.
Numbers are numbers, but numbers without context sometimes could be misleading. The two numbers, everything is down, all of our, for the first 6 months. Someone is going to say what happened over the July 4th weekend. I will bring those numbers in to perspective in a few minutes. We usually go to June 30th. That's where we are as of right now. We do notice that our aggravated assaults are up for the year, and what's kind of disturbing about that is our aggravated assaults are up, especially in firearms cases, individuals being injured by firearms. Layman's terms, individuals being shot. We're not the only city that's seeing this. It's happening across the country. Deputy Chief just showed me a news release out of New York on Staten Island. There was a shooting spree on Staten Island. 5 individuals were injured after a major shooting and a major crash. So it's happening around the country. As we know, there was an arts festival in Trenton, New Jersey not too long ago. 20 individuals were shot by 2 gangs who opened fire on each other. So we are not immune to these individual problems that we have. Of our homicides, 2 of them are domestic related. All of the homicides, save 1, were by the use of a firearm. Notice that our burglaries are down. They've been tracking down for the last decade. Motor vehicle thefts are up. What we're finding on a lot of motor vehicle thefts, as usual, individuals are either leaving their keys in the car, or the new one is to leave your fob in the car, or to leave the fob of the other car in one car that's unlocked. Somebody gets into that car, takes the fob, goes to the other car, and drives away. I don't understand why people leave their cars unlocked, but they do, and they leave the keys in them, or they leave the fob in them, and we have motor vehicle thefts. When we like to look at our cases, we want to analyze everything we can. 2 that we analyze are sexual assault cases, rape cases. The other one is aggravated assaults. This does not mean that an individual who's injured during a domestic violence case is taken any lighter than if it's a case that happens in the neighborhood on the street. We just like to divide them up and let you know half of our aggravated assault cases are domestic related. The other half are situations that happen in the community or on the street, and I will get into a little bit more detail on that in a moment. Same thing with our rape cases. The vast majority, the individual is known. That does not mean we take that case lightly. We still have a female who's been violated. We work that case as hard as we can to bring the perpetrator to justice. But we do like the public to know that we don't have a lot of cases, fortunately, here and around the country where we have somebody waiting to attack women at will. It's not quite what you would see on TV. Larceny cases. 81 of the larceny cases from a motor vehicle, where something is stolen out of a motor vehicle. 81 of those cases was a firearm. I find it almost unbelievable that you leave your gun in the car and then you go about your business and you come back and your car's been broken into and your weapon has been stolen. But we had 81 of those cases so far in the first 6 months. That means 81 guns are on the street unaccounted for. We like to look at crime density. Now, when we look at this and you see the one at an area called 227 and 225 zone, that's the Beach Borough. And we want everyone to know that a vast majority of the cases at the Beach Borough are what we call lifestyle driven. 2 o'clock in the morning, individual may have a little too much adult beverages. They decide to go out somewhere. They decide to go and try and buy marijuana from somebody and they get held up. Or there's some kind of an altercation, a domestic assault case, an aggravated assault case, where an individual is in the wrong place at the wrong time, and it's lifestyle driven. These are not cases where folks are in their hotel rooms and they're being attacked at will, okay? And I need to say that very strenuously. Our oceanfront is a very safe place, save a few cases. John. Then we like to look at our robbery density. Our robbery density is changing a little bit. We have an area, Holland Road and South Rosemont. We're beginning to see an uptick in our robbery cases there. One reason is we have a lot of commercial establishments that are open all night. We have a lot of foot traffic in that particular area. And we have condensed housing. If you have condensed housing, you have a number of commercial establishments, you'll see a little bit of a robbery increase, which we did, but remember our robberies are down right now from where they were the last 6 months of last year. When we look at burglaries, there are certain areas where we have an increase in our burglary cases, or we have a concentration of burglary cases. Those are areas where we have a concentration of housing units. Multifamily dwellings, as you know and I know, that whole Lynn Haven corridor area, a lot of multifamily dwelling units. Holland Road has a lot of multifamily dwelling units. Western Bayside, a lot of multifamily, and therefore we will have a number of burglary cases. This is something that eventually, sooner or later, somebody's going to ask me about the cases that we had over the July 4th weekend at the oceanfront. That's why the dates here are different than the rest of the presentation. We've included up to July 5th. We want you to know that, yes, we've had 13 cases at the oceanfront where we had a shooting victim. We had 6 on July 4th. We had 2 the previous evening, which is 8. We had 4 during College Beach weekend, and then we had another one in the middle of winter at 17th and Atlantic. The one at 14th or 13th and Atlantic where 2 individuals were shot, we didn't make the arrest immediately. During College Beach weekend, we made a series of arrests, one of which was a shooter. The other cases, we made arrests. Individuals had weapons, but they were not the actual shooter. As far as the case on July 4th goes, we had the 6 individuals shot in and around 18th Street. Detectives have been working extremely diligently on that case. They have some very strong leads, and I'm going to go out on a little bit of a limb and say those leads are extremely strong, and that case is has a high percentage of clearance to it. I'm going to say that we're going to clear that case. Might not be immediately during this presentation, but those detectives have been working very close to clear that case, as well as the officers who responded to all of the shootings. As we know, when the gunfire started on any one of these days, those officers were on the scene in less than 30 seconds. And then we wanted to look at all violent crimes in and around the oceanfront area. And again, aggravated assaults are up. Most of those are the gunfire cases. Everything else is tracking down. John? We break out who we arrest. If you remember last year, I talked about the number of juveniles that were being arrested. It's still there, but the numbers have come down a little bit. Our detectives are working extremely close. Our detective bureau is working extremely close with our special investigations. We work very close with our sister cities because we know that individuals who commit crimes don't stick to their geographic area. So we work very closely with all the jurisdictions in the area as well as with their federal partners. The numbers kind of speak for themselves. When you see that we have some numbers that are down, it's because our crime has been down for the first 6 months. We have long said that strong communities will make police obsolete. We're working very heavily in a number of our areas in the city. We will begin our community neighborhood surveys. We are starting in the middle of summer this year because what we find, more people are out. We get a better rate of return, so to speak, as opposed to during school times. We're going to increase our hours a little bit. We want to talk to as many citizens as we possibly can. Last year, we did complete over 2,000 door-to-door surveys. There's something about a police officer talking directly to a citizen, and they both have the commonality of a better lifestyle for that particular neighborhood. There's something about that. There's something about breaking down that barrier of communication. As we've always said, it's difficult to hate up close because you have 2 individuals with the same end goal in mind. These are the dates that we will be out. We would open invitation to anyone at this table who would like to join us. We are going to partner with our friends from Fire and Rescue in some of these neighborhoods because what we've said is public safety is a concerted effort of many, many different departments. I was a firm believer for years that the police will knock on the door, but I think we've gotten to the point now where we could expand it to Fire and Rescue helping us out. I know Department of Human Services wants to also see if we can ask a few questions in their area. And I just think it'll be something that if an individual needs some additional help from another city agency, we could make that connection very quickly. Thank you. We had two situations this weekend. We had hundreds of citizens volunteer to assist us in a search for a missing woman. Hundreds of your citizens came out to volunteer to do that. We also had another case at Lake Smith where we're working a suspicious death. And the dive team was out all day, and it was extremely a rough day. It was very warm, and okay, they're in the water, but they come out of the water. They had no breaks during the day. Citizens showed up and provided lunch and drinks for the officers working. So it's something about the citizens of our city that you don't see in many other places. They really do support the police on a number of avenues, this being one of them. Not to be outdone, at the oceanfront on July 4th, the Citizen Advisory Council puts on a large spread for all of our officers. And on the following weekend, one of the civic leagues did come out and provide dinner for the officers on that weekend. So it happens in our city regular, and I think a lot of that has to do with the continual contact that our officers have. But the fact that I think in our city we have a lot of support for city services. We answered about 85,000 calls for service the first 6 months. We arrested just under 9,000 people. You could see the numbers. If you add these numbers up, and some of them are counted in more than one place. For example, a field contact may be during a traffic stop. A traffic stop may have resulted in a moving violation. So somewhere in there, anywhere from a low end of 131,000 to an upper end of 151,000 citizen contacts in the first 6 months of this year. And nobody calls the cops because they're having a good day. Nobody enjoys being pulled over. Nobody likes going to jail. It's just a fact of life. I've never had a case where somebody's called and said, can you send the police over for dinner? In all of these cases, we track how we use force. We track a little bit differently than a lot of places in the country on how we use force. If you look at the total numbers, we've used force in 0.2% of the cases, and most of those were what we call hands-on or control techniques. That is, I put my hands on you, you willingly then submit to the arrest, and we effect the arrest. I do want you to look at one thing that we did notice. 16% of all of the use of force cases were a patrol car being pointed at an individual. In many cities, they don't consider that a use of force. We do. I immediately said, we need to analyze this, what's happening. Our SWAT team has taken over the vast majority of our search warrants now. When a SWAT team does a search warrant, they are armed, they have weapons, that's considered a use of force case, okay? But we do that for a reason, and that is, and I have to really congratulate the particular captains involved, Captain of Special Operations, Sean Adams, Captain of Detective Bureau, Laura Kaiser, Captain of Special Investigations, Frank Genova. They got together and they said, we want to start using the SWAT team on more of these cases based on one case that we had where officers were shot. And they did that at that level, and then came to the deputy chiefs and the chief and said, we are now going to embed SWAT members straight in the Detective Bureau to analyze these search warrants, which is the safest way to do it. And I bring that up because a lot of times we want to say that things are driven top down. In our agency, a lot of these decisions are driven from mid-level up. 13 of the cases that we had for the first 6 months, we encountered an individual who was armed, and we had to use force. None of those cases did we use deadly force. And I really like to accentuate that, all of the gun cases that we have. And this year we have 349 times we brought a weapon into our property and evidence. Some of those cases were found weapons, some were weapons we took off of individuals, others were confiscated property. But 349 times our officers came in contact with a weapon. These particular cases, the individual had the weapon either in their hand or close proximity, and your officers were able to effect those arrests. Leaning forward is a comment that I've stolen from Deputy Chief Zuccaro when he does CompStat. Gun interdictions is what we're going to work on real heavily. Now, there's two places of gun interdictions. We know the oceanfront is one, and we know the western part of the city is our second area. It's easier for a gun interdiction program to work in a neighborhood. it is easier because it's stable. People come into the neighborhood, people leave the neighborhood. It's usually the same individuals on a daily basis, or at least not every night, like the oceanfront where we have 10, 15,000 different people from all over the state who happen to show up, some of whom are armed. We're about 2 weeks away from implementing our body-worn camera deployment. Not this Thursday, the following Thursday, we will have a press briefing. We have already done a video for external release, a video for internal release for our officers, and we are extremely close to finally getting this program off the ground. I know some people are going to say Virginia Beach is, quote, the last in the region to enact a body-worn camera program. You're absolutely correct. We think we've done our due diligence. We think we've answered most of the questions before they've been asked. And the really good part about the delay that we've had is the technology has increased, and we've now taken advantage of the new technological advances in this particular body-worn cameras. And we want to thank you for the funding to build the 4th precinct. It is underway. I keep hearing the date that it's going to be finished. I will be extremely surprised if we actually make the date, because usually there's a 6-month lag. But considering the existing 4th precinct is a large closet, the new precinct is well appreciated. Questions?
Any questions for the chief? Yes, John?
I'll go back to slide 11, and it's juvenile arrest, that large number increase, well, that what, no, it's a theory of small numbers, and I understand theory of small numbers.
Simple assault or?
No, this is the forcible rape number. From 3
From
to
3 to
7.
7.
This is juvenile on juvenile. I think I'm reading that category
Yes,
correct. And without seeing the numbers going back the other way, and I don't know if that's an isolated event or events that cause that, but though it's small, it's a huge jump.
It is.
And I don't know if it's an aberration. We can talk about that later, but that's one that did jump out at me as being significant, even though it is a small number, because that's 4 children.
It is. And again, our detectives analyze all of these cases. Are they known? Victim and suspect known? Are they unknown? And these cases are ones that we can only react to after the crime has been committed, as opposed to preventing some of these crimes. But yes, sir, that is a number, as well as the simple assault numbers are up for juveniles.
And lastly, over the years, I've been looking at these reports, those same hot spots consistently have shown up. And I know we've done a number of community policing and other interventions in those areas. So I know we don't see the trend data here, but I'd like to see whether or not over the time as we've been in there, even though it's still hot, the numbers look good. And sometimes you can see a red number, but the underlying data tells a different story. It's red, but it's still an improving situation. And I would like to see that, because I'm sure that's the case, but I'd be interested in seeing that.
And we do that on a monthly basis during our ComStat report. In one of those areas, which is zone 326, but it takes in a lot of Western Bayside, the captain of that precinct, John Orr, gives us a breakdown specifically of that area, and we're tracking it. I'll be happy to send you those numbers.
All right, thank you very much, Chief.
We're pretty confident that a lot of what the 3rd precinct has done has resulted in a positive decline in crimes and an increase in public efficacy of the police department.
This is a great report, and I can't imagine many police departments would love to be able to have these numbers. They're amazing.
Ms. Hadley?
I don't know if this is the right kind of report to ask this question, but it's certainly the time. One of the things that we did in this budget was, I think you're hiring somebody to work on recruitment and retention, which I think is so important. I think we all worry about the large number of vacancies and those kinds of things. We'd like to all have more police officers and so forth, but how soon do you expect to get to that point of hiring that individual or those individuals and working on that point? And can you sort of keep us abreast on how, if there's any progress or what you all are finding? I was just thinking that event on the 4th of July, can't imagine somebody standing on a street corner 4th of July and starting to shoot, but that's kind of our worst nightmare. that's kind of the thing that probably doesn't make it real attractive to want to maybe be doing those things out there like you folks do, and I know we all appreciate it, but how about this recruitment and retention piece?
As a matter of fact, Deputy Chief Zuccaro and I had that conversation about an hour before coming here. We're meeting this week to begin to implement the first steps of the program, which would be the hiring of the individuals to get the workforce development program. It's solidified, now it has to be operationalized. So we're going to begin to work on that. You did bring up a good point, and that is retention and recruiting across the country in policing is pretty dark right now. It's pretty stark as to where we are. And some of it has to do with the fact that these young police officers do things, as I always say, for people they don't know, they have no connection to, will never see again, and then they're criticized. Somebody criticizes police work on a daily basis. And so many young folks just say, I don't know if that's the route I want to take. On the flip side, we have the men and women who are here, the men and women who are working are dedicated to the profession, and they're dedicated to the city, and they do it because they care. But I will be more than happy to send you an update. Mr. Hanson and Mr. Cover will send updates on where we are on the workforce development program.
Thank you, glad we're doing it.
Anybody else have any questions? Thank you very much, Chief.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
We appreciate everything you and your people do, and great job.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Chief. Appreciate it. Mr. Mayor, members of council, next Andy Friedman's coming forward, and believe it or not, we can see the light at the end of the construction tunnel for the Housing Resource Center. So Andy's here to give you an update, and is going to introduce Ruthie today.
Sir.
All right, good. Excellent.
We don't want those microphones to go away.
Mr. City Manager, thank you for that. I'm Andy Friedman, and with me is Ruth Hill, who is our new Homeless Services Administrator. She's the person who's going to be running the Housing Resource Center. And we have brought with us the team of people, mostly from nonprofit and for-profit contractors, who will actually be operating the activities in the center. Just so you get to see a few faces, it will be a short presentation, and we'll walk you through it in a minute. With me also is Director Danette Smith of Human Services, because as you know, Human Services is a key player in the building, occupying the entire third floor. Our first slide is the artist's rendering of what the building was going to look like. And this is actually the building as of last week. It's an amazingly similar picture. It's in really good shape, and I'm going to walk you through the plan to open it. This is what it looks like when you come up to the entrance off Jersey Avenue. So here's the schedule for opening the building, and we believe that this is a valid schedule, barring anything unforeseen. We expect to have a certificate of occupancy on August 3rd and begin moving staff in on that day. We have for you and in your presentation, and we're going to hand out some save the date notices for the opening and building dedication on August 23rd. Our providers, which are the nonprofits that will actually deliver services to people in the building, will begin moving in on August 27th, and we'll have participants in the building on September 6th. As part of this whole process, we'll be closing the Lighthouse Center because, as you know, there's a day service center in the building that will replace the Lighthouse Center. And everything will be open and running on September 10th. So I want to remind everybody of the key people who made this happen. Karen Percillo's in the room. She really did triple duty for many years as our Homeless Services Administrator and Housing Development Administrator and our project manager for the Housing Resource Center. Our architect was Wallertot and Sadler, Maureen Meckelfresh. Public Works plays a critical role in all city construction contracts. Everett Herndon, Kevin Jensen, Tim Oliver, and Tom Nicholas were key parts of all of that. And as you know, SB Ballard was our construction company, did a great job and brought the building in basically under the estimate of the original cost. Just a reminder, of what our approach is to operating the building. We want to be the facilitator of what happens, but basically, most of the direct services to clients will be done by nonprofit providers. In our building, we have staff that will work under Ruthie for certain of the services, especially the outreach team that you established, central intake, and a prevention and diversion program. But the balance of services, will be run by nonprofit providers. We did a competitive process to select providers in almost all cases, and I'm going to show you that right now. So we awarded basically 6 contracts in the building. 5 of them that were done competitively with actual RFPs managed through the finance department's procurement. To start, we had a non-competitive award to Samaritan House, which is the family shelter provider. They are bringing an $85,000 federal grant to defray the cost of operations. All the rest were competitive. We awarded a grant, the contract to ABM Incorporated for multiple services in the building: operations, maintenance, custodial, food services, and security. And Ruthie's going to introduce some of those folks to you. The Judeo-Christian Outreach Center was awarded 2 contracts for Lighthouse Center Day Services and the single shelter. Southeastern Virginia Health System will run the health clinic in the building, and Virginia Supportive Housing will run the apartments in the building. So Ruth Hill, who is with me, is our Homeless Services Administrator. She will be the person in charge of the building, and she will coordinate closely with Elizabeth Batista Boone of the Department of Human Services, who is Danette's site administrator for the building. Under Ruthie will be Pam Shine, our Homeless Systems Manager, Erin Walker, our Grant and Resource Development Coordinator, Larry Jones, in charge of Operations and Maintenance, and Diane Hoteling, our Volunteer and Community Outreach Coordinator. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Ruthie, who is going to actually talk to you about some of the people on our team. Ruthie, go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks, Andy. Good afternoon. Thank you. And I personally wanted to thank each one of you on the City Council, as well as Dave Hansen and all of the team that has come together to make this a really wonderful opportunity for the people in our community that are experiencing a homeless crisis. I have been working on this since its an inception, actually in 2006, as part of Beach Community Partnership. And I am a citizen of Virginia Beach, and this is actually a personal passion of mine. So I couldn't be more excited to be a part of this amazing team to help bring this to fruition today. So thank you for your time. So you can see my picture there, and I am leading this charge, and I am humbled to be able to do it. Under me is Pam Shine. She is actually the Homeless Systems Manager, and she is managing all of the programming that's happening in the building. Larry is here, Larry right here. He is the Operation and Maintenance Specialist. He is new to the city, as am I. I come from the nonprofit sector. Larry comes from the public sector, the private sector, but we're excited to be part of what the city is doing to make this happen. And then Diane Hoteling is our Volunteer and Community Outreach Coordinator, and she's also been working with homelessness in our region. She came out of Virginia Wesleyan, and she's a wonderful addition to our team. So this is our team leads. We actually have 3 of them. Stacy Leary is going to be managing coordinated assessment, and that is the system where people actually come into connecting with services through the homeless services system, and she coordinates all of what happens when you get involved in needing, you're in a housing crisis in the city. Darla Jenkins will be leading our new program called Prevention and Diversion, and this program is set up so people will we can keep them from being homeless, and we can connect them to services before they actually need shelter. And then Karen Grouton has been currently with the city, and she was promoted to our outreach and engagement team lead, and she is the person who leads the team that goes out in the community and actually goes into the woods and on the street corners and on the ocean front and connects people that are experiencing a homeless crisis to come into services at the city. Elizabeth Batista Boone is on vacation, and she is not here, but we've been working with Gaylin and Danette, my team before me, planning for over a year on integrated services, and I couldn't be more thrilled to see how we're coming together to really give our citizens experiencing a housing crisis a robust service plan so that when you enter the HRC, you have need of housing services, but you also may need to connect to mainstream services. You can sit down with the team together and get one intake done. So you don't have to go through that process multiple times, and we're pretty excited about that, what that's going to look like. So you can see here they'll be doing integrated services team. That's a brand new team of 6 people that's going to come together and work with our housing team to connect to services, child welfare prevention, employment services, financial assistance, and PATH as behavioral health will all be on the 3rd floor of the HRC. So I'd like to have Todd and Nicole to stand for you. They are the team from Judeo-Christian. They'll be managing the day support services as well as the single shelters providers. We're thrilled to have them as a partner. They've been doing this work in the city of Virginia Beach through their own nonprofit for multiple years, probably over 30 years, Todd? 32, yeah. So we're excited to have them as partners in the HRC. Samaritan House. And where are they? Oh, there you are, Stephanie. Stephanie and Christine are also community partners that have been working with the city, doing services at Samaritan House. And as Andy mentioned, they're coming alongside to do the interim housing, and they will be doing 10 motel-style family units in the HRC. Thank you, ladies. Virginia Supportive Housing is not here today. They currently are running 5 different permanent supportive housing programs in our region, and they're coming alongside to manage the 30 apartments that are going to be on the wing of the HRC. And then we have Southeastern Virginia Health Systems are here. We have Valda, who's the COO, and we have Nona, who's the CFO, that are here today. And they're going to be doing, they're going to start part-time, but they're going to be doing health services in the HRC. And it's really set up so that people that are clients that are participating in the HRC with a housing need are the first ones that'll take priority. Then they're going to be open to the community and the medically underserved in our community, and they will be starting part-time based on a funding issue starting in September. And then we have ABM here, which are, here we go, Lisa, and we've got them all over the city. So ABM is currently doing services in the city of Virginia Beach. They have contracts with the aquarium, they have contracts with the library, as well as Parks and Rec. So we are thrilled to have them as a for-profit partner to come in and do operations maintenance, the custodial work, linens, and under them they have subcontractors of food services will be run by Culinary Services Group. Dunbar, Andrew is here. Andrew with Dunbar. Maggio is here to do the security, and then the pest control will be done by Dodson. All of these sub-providers, as well as providers and subcontractors, will be coming to a very robust orientation process with us. So everybody in the building will have understanding of how to work with this population and what the expectations of how to engage a homeless person while they're in the HRC. So we're going to be doing that in August. So safety's always been an issue that people ask Andy and I about. So what we want you to know is that we will have cameras and access to with a Linnell system as well as a hotel card reader. Nobody will come in and out of the building without us knowing that they're there. We will have a visitor management system where people can come in and use an iPad and check in and say, I need to go to the health clinic. They can come through the front door, and then we will triage them with an ambassador, a volunteer ambassador, to get them to where they need to be. We're going to do, as I mentioned, we're going to have a really robust orientation process for everybody that'll talk about the workflow and the screening process, and then explain how all of the volunteer services will work in the building. So the other thing that's really excited about what's going on is we started what we're calling HRC Engage, and it is an open forum, and we've been meeting bi-monthly with the community that's a mile radius around the HRC, the business community, the residential community, to invite them in and to say, hey, this is who we are. We would like you to be connected to what we're doing as advocates, as supporters, and we'd like to answer any questions that you have about what's going on in the HRC. On the 31st of this month, we're having a tour. We have 40 people that have signed up, and we're going to actually have our meeting there at the HRC. So we're excited about that. Transition Coalition as well is a group that we've pulled together from the service providers at the oceanfront who are doing service delivery with this population currently. And we know that things are going to change as we move into the HRC. So we're having meetings now, so how we can best collaborate on moving services or changing services or integrating services that are happening at the oceanfront as well as the HRC. And those meetings have been going on for 2 months. We have another one next week. So please save the date. We're inviting you to our opening dedication, building dedication on the 23rd, and we're looking forward to seeing you at 10 a.m. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you, Ruthie. And I just wanted to mention one other thing that we didn't put in the presentation, but some of you are aware of the critical role that Virginia Beach City Schools have played. We consulted with them before we brought the idea of creating the HRC to you, and they were very supportive of allowing this center to go at its location. We have good relationships with Kay Thomas, who's the principal of Renaissance, and the prior superintendent, as well as the prior board chairman, gave their support to us establishing the center there. We also want you to know that the school social work office, which works with children who are school students who are currently homeless, will have an office in the Housing Resource Center and work directly with Samaritan House and the school children who are members of homeless families to ensure to do everything possible to help them achieve school success while they're staying at the HRC. So that's a really important component also. There are also some other things. We're going to have a lot of nonprofit providers who are interested in providing enhancements to the services there. Those are going to start in October after we get the building open and everything set and going. And at this point, we'd be happy to answer any questions you have for us.
I think Mr. Ern had a comment or.
Yeah, I had a comment. I just wanted to thank Andy and his staff. I mean, I think this is really going to be transformative. And, last week we had the opportunity to talk about a delay in our action, which created something better than we had on the table at the time. And there really have only been a handful that I can remember during the 12 years I've been here. This is definitely one of those. As many of y'all remember, we were going to actually just move and expand the Lighthouse Center over onto Bird Neck Road, and we paused, and Andy quickly realized that in terms of reducing the impacts of homelessness, what was really lacking was housing, which we couldn't get in that location because of the Navy's impacts. And so, to have this central location, I think is going to be very transformative for a lot of lives in our city, and I'm real proud of it, and thank you, Andy. And I'd also like to thank you, Mr. Mayor, and Jim Wood, because I know you all worked mightily to try and find a suitable location, and I think we're there, and we're going to see some big wins from this. So thanks to all of you.
Thank you. Ms. Henley?
Well, John said a lot of what I was thinking, because, my goodness, we've been trying to work with this for at least 30 years, I think maybe a little longer than that. And it's just, everybody has just done so many things over the years and tried so hard, but really sounds like you all have thought of everything. I'm sure you haven't. You're going to be coming out with some other things.
Right.
But just the ability to deal with so many different aspects and people, and I think the homeless prevention part is such a exciting part to have too. I would just say thank you to Andy and Karen for even coming down in the county and presenting, because I think this is something we need to get the word out to all of our citizens, that we're going to be having all of these kinds of things available so that they can help those people that they know who maybe fall in some of these categories take advantage of what's there. I think this is going to be one of the grandest things the city has done. I'm just so tickled to have it almost ready.
Great, thank you.
This is a great step forward, and want to congratulate you, Andy, and all of your staff and all of the different people that are involved and going to be supportive of the program. It shows a lot of cooperation between different departments, and I think we can all be very proud of what you're doing.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Room full of help, isn't it?
Let us know how
It's
we
a
can
room
help.
full of help, isn't it?
It really is.
Thank you, perfect.
And if you have Todd on your team, you're always gonna do great.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan, Ed, Kayleen, and everybody for being here. Nice to meet you.
Thank you, man. Yep.
We should buy the staff hot dogs from Kevin's one day and bring it over.
Oh, yeah, oh, that's it.
You wanna go one day?
All right, Mr. City Manager.
All right, pretty exciting. And let's just not forget Andy's leadership. As John said, Councilman Ern, as you said, he has been steadfast, even in the hardest of times, when we just didn't think we'd get that solution. And he's really picked a great winner in Ruthie to manage this facility. She's outstanding, and every time we visit that place to see that construction take shape, SB Ballard seems to be delivering a quality product at a great price. So we have an important action for you tonight, and to set the stage for that, we placed on your agenda a review of the Sports Center Comprehensive Agreement, and are prepared to first give you an oversight. You did receive a white paper today in your Friday packet, giving you some additional information. It encapsulated many of the questions that Mr. Moss had been asking and that we've been sharing with you, and re-summarized a lot of the information that we had been reformatting and formulating and then being able to present to you. So Ron's going to give you a quick summary, and then we're going to open it up and answer all your questions.
Thanks, Mr. Manager. Mayor, members of council, it's a major milestone tonight with consideration for the comprehensive agreement for design build of the Sports Center. I recognize Taylor and Dana and Tom and Kevin, Nancy and Rick and Brad as part of the negotiation development team for this. We will have an operating agreement for your consideration in early fall, realistically. But quickly review what you have before you this evening. Item number 10 has two action items. Number one, as we mentioned a couple weeks ago, in order for us to accomplish the parking associated with the Sports Center, we're asking for a transfer within CIP accounts. Again, it's basically a timing issue that the capacity needed for one of the elements of the dome site is not really needed till next fiscal year at that volume, and so we're asking for the $3.5 million transfer within those appropriate CIP appropriations. The second one is the resolution approving the comprehensive agreement that was negotiated and posted several weeks ago. And that item, the highlights again, that the Sports Center construction and design with contingencies at $57.7 million, $10.3 million with parking, that we anticipate construction start in earnest with site clearing and early E&S work in August, with a completion targeted for November of 2020. A couple of the highlights of the information that we share with you in the white paper and fact sheet is that we continue every week, Nancy and her team and Brad, working with our prospective operator, building the pro forma. To give you some sense of year 3, which really is kind of that's our stabilized year, and then really maturity of the total number of events that we think will hit the sweet spot in year 5. But the net new events over and above the 17 that we currently host in the convention center is anticipated in year 3 right around 43. Some of those events are existing. Some of those events are prospective new events based on the fact that we're adding a track. And then others are part of a business plan that we're formulating with the operator to actually develop our own tournaments here so that we keep the operations and the income from those tournaments here in Virginia Beach. So again, at a real maturity anticipated almost 70 some events that we can see in the facility. Of course, the tournament business has been the focus, a lot of what we discussed over the past year and a half. With the operator, what we've selected is someone who has the experience and the capacity of having experiences for our residents, for tournament and league play, for before and after school programs, much like is actually run at the current Virginia Beach Field House. And so we will continue to build that pro forma and bring those details to you as we flesh out the details for the operating agreement. To give you some sense of what we believe the estimate of the taxes are and the benefit to the city, in your handout that we send your package, we actually had the fines, fees, and inspections in the wrong column, and I apologize for that error. But those do go to the general fund, and then there's some earmark, as we know, for tip, tap, and open space funds. So we feel it's a good pro forma, and it's going to be a significant impact to our city. I'm happy to take any questions or comments that you have.
Any questions for Ron? Any comments anybody wants to make? All right, thank you very much,
Okay,
Ron.
thank you, team.
Thanks, Ron. Appreciate it. Next, I've asked Deputy City Manager for Public Safety, Steve Cover, to come forward and provide to you a briefing on our City Manager Working Group with regards to vertical pay. And one of the most important comments that I can make is that we have for many years been engaged in trying to solve our compression issues. And the facts are that since 2006, City Council has provided over $15 million in funding to address compression, both horizontal and vertical. Of that $15 million, about $8.7 million has been provided to the public safety component of compression. And of that $8.7 million, over $5 million of it has been dedicated just to the subject that we're going to discuss today, vertical compression. It's unfortunate that we have not been able to solve this. You made a decision during your approval of your budget to provide up to $3 million to address compression, both vertical and horizontal, and to allow the City Manager Working Group, which is comprised of its chairman, Steve Cover, Deputy City Manager, and the three public safety chiefs, the ECCS 911 Director, the Human Resources Director, and support from the Management Services Department to work on solutions that could potentially be brought forward to resolve the vertical compression issues that have plagued the city for over a decade. Your commitment in the budget ordinance with your FY19 budget approval did not commit to a methodology, nor did it commit to specific dollars associated with the expenditure of that $3 million, but that you did acknowledge the requirement for us to deliver a recommendation by the end of June 30th, to which we provided you in your packet that recommendation. We have had some significant discussion, the mayor and the vice mayor, about the poor communications plan that we exhibited. I think we erred, but we erred with a good conscience that we did not want to share our recommendations in the public safety arena until we at least shared our recommendations with the City Council. For that, we probably erred, and we probably should have walked the dog inside the associations and inside the workforce before we brought it to you as a recommendation. Unfortunately, I don't think they would have received it any differently than they did. That's my personal opinion as a manager and oversight of all the public safety departments and officers and firefighters and medics that support this city. So today, we're going to try to present to you our rationale for a process and for a system that will not only provide affordable and a fair way of approaching this, but will also encourage our officers and our firefighters and our medics to aspire to compete for and to become promoted and to assume the leadership positions that we so essentially need to keep our public safety one of the greatest public safety systems on the East Coast, if not the United States. So with that, as an introduction, I'm going to let Steve Cover take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Good afternoon, Mayor, members of council. I'm here representing our work group that the city manager commissioned back in April to take a look at compression and public safety pay plans in the public safety departments. I want to thank the work group members. The manager mentioned them. A lot of effort went into this. This is a complex issue that we worked pretty hard on for a couple of months, trying to get to a reasonable solution that was fair and equitable. So with that, we'll move forward. We had next one, please. Thank you. We had 3 milestones that the manager tasked us with, and that was by the end of June, recommendations to address vertical compression among our public safety employees, and then in October, by October 1 of this year, recommendations for a public safety pay plan provided to the MLT, and then in January, recommendations for horizontal compression. Next slide, please. So how we got here. We have worked on public safety vertical salary compression, as we have worked on compression across the entire organization since 2006, if you will, in the modern era. And we have, as the manager has alluded to, we have spent many millions of dollars trying to solve this complex problem. The basic sense with vertical compression is we want our supervisors to be compensated more than the people under them, their employees. It's quite that simple. But over the years, with the inability to provide raises and salaries stagnated, that has caused compression across our ranks. So vertical compression using our prior methodology, and the prior methodology was to bring the supervisor to $1 above the highest paid employee under them. So if we were to use that methodology today, we would have 59 sworn supervisors that are compressed in that manner. And that cost to correct that would be the number you see, $548,000. Next slide, please. So vertical compression, some of the concerns with the prior methodology. It would address salary compression only for the present time. So meaning that the next promotion, there could be compression that would reoccur. In fact, if we enact this methodology today, there will already be people that are compressed at this particular time. The supervisor received the compression adjustment even if the lower ranked personnel had a special skill, and that's one of the things that the work group is working on. For example, in the fire department, we have medics in the fire department, and we have captains that supervise those medics. And that compresses the captains, but the captains do not have that medic skill. So we want to work on a way to pull that out of the equation so it's a little bit more fair and equitable. That's going to be addressed downstream as we continue to move through the process. Another concern is there's no recognition of the value of tenure in the lower ranked personnel in comparison to the new supervisor. So the manager had mentioned previously in the military, perhaps there are junior members of the military that are paid that are tenured, that are sometimes paid at a higher salary than the people that are supervising them. Lastly, this method is costly to maintain. We have proven that over the years. We've spent a lot of money to try to solve this problem since 2006, and we are still here today trying to solve this problem. So taking a look at the methodology that the work group came up with, just the numbers, there will be 43 sworn supervisors that are compressed using this method, and it would cost approximately $173,000 to mitigate this problem. So moving on. So the main thing with our work group proposal is that we wanted to ensure that the public safety supervisors reach the midpoint of their assigned pay range within 3 years following their promotion. And we wanted to use a market rate analogy, and HR and compensation officials say this mid-range methodology or this market rate methodology is used by organizations to compare pay across cities and organizations. City Council approved merit increases, and those merit increases will help move those personnel along and will be used to move that supervisor along in this process. So the pay range for example, a police captain or a police sergeant or a fire department captain, the pay range is approximately $60,000 to $90,000. And we are saying with this methodology that within 3 years, we will bring a new supervisor to the mid-range level of that salary band. So we'll bring that individual to the $75,000 range within that 3-year period. That is a premise of the work group's work. Next slide, please. Some advantages of this work group proposal is it focuses on the supervisor's position on the pay range rather than the salary of the subordinate. It provides clarity to everyone involved. It is a method, a means to an end, so people can see where they fall in the program. And it accepts that employees may have a higher salary than supervisors for a brief period of time. It provides a level of predictability that our public safety personnel have asked for, and pay adjustments use available resources a little more responsibly, the group felt, and we felt it was a little more sustainable in the long term. One of the things that we tried to do was front load the funding. So we would put, if you were compressed, we were going to suggest that we put a $3,500 administrative pay increase coupled with the merit increase in that first year to help move that process along. It is a change from how we've done business in the past, obviously. Moving on to the next slide, some of our challenges and some of the feedback that we've received. And it's, the success of the proposal is dependent on continued funding. As I stated when I started off, in some years in the past, we have not been able to provide merit increases and pay increases. So the success of this program is dependent on that. It may not be applicable to some non-public safety personnel. We're going to study that as we move on with the rest of the organization. As I've said before, it's a change from how we've done it in the past. It's actually a big change from how we've done it in the past. There's some remaining issues to address. We talked about specialty pay and stipends, horizontal compression, and the rest of the city workforce. The manager spoke to the communications issues. We had a fairly tight timeline. We wanted to make sure that we got you folks briefed, and we understand that we need to improve on the employee side to make sure we get their input. So compression has occurred over many years, and it's going to be difficult for us to fix in 1 year. So we think this plan is responsible. It's a responsible use of available resources. We think it's sustainable over the long term, and we think it adds a level of predictability for all concerned. I want to take a minute here to thank council for your support of public safety, not only this year, but over the years. And I'm happy to announce as I stand before you right now, based on your support of public safety, it played an instrumental role As the chief was briefing earlier today, we just found out on the break that we do in fact have the shooter from the July 4th shootings in custody.
Way to go.
Kudos to the hard work in PD. No question, our detectives that do the work behind the scenes do yeoman's work. The street officers, you know, their response and the support that we get from EMS and fire on that front. So we want to thank you for your support. Any questions? We've got
questions for
the
Steve?
experts here with me.
Bob?
Yeah, thank you. And, you know, but thank you all for, you know, trying to make something and moving the dial a little bit. But the fact is, I think the briefing we just had with the CompStat just really underscores the importance of public safety. You know, police, fire, EMS, sheriffs, you know, they're part of the infrastructure. I think that term was used before. It's a priority. Public safety is part of our economic development, it's part of our core, it's part of our safety, it's why people want to live here. And, you know, the point is, though, since I've been here for 14 years, we've been kicking this can all over the place. And the fact is, no real resolution that is satisfying, you know, to the many people that are in uniform, you know, are content with what we have been doing. And, you know, quite frankly, the term I would use, it seemed like benign neglect over the years in a lot of ways. And the point is, though, that, you know, given the job that they do, you know, with the importance of it, and when we talk about retention, you know, salary is a major, you know, force of retention, about why people stay on a job. And the point is, it's also a morale factor that we have going. So the point is, though, you know, given the challenges that it's a 24/7 job, anybody can pick up a cell phone and call 911, and a public safety person would come. This has to be a priority. It has to be done. And I think the problem that I had with the recommendation, there was no addressing of the rank and file until January. Is that correct?
That's correct. The horizontal piece of it
That
will be
correct.
downstream, yes, sir.
But the point is, though, can we find a better system, period? You know, like, you know, when I was in the Marine Corps, we had a step system. And, you know, it was based on tenure, it was based on rank, but we also got specialty pay and everything else. And it just seemed to be more fair and equitable. So the point is, though, you know, I just think that, you know, we can't articulate about this anymore. We got to set it into action, you know, because, you know, times are becoming challenging. We find out that, you know, crime and everything is up nationwide. And the point is, though, to us to maintain our mantle as the, you know, one of the safest cities our size, I think it's going to be worth the investment.
Ms. Henley?
Well, Bob said 14 years. I think it's been a whole lot longer than that. Like,
Probably.
I think it's forever. And
We did National Police Chief's Officer in 1986.
and you know, that, I think the answer is there's really no final answer to compression, and it's just going to, it's an ongoing thing. And I guess this first challenge you've got here, success of the proposal is dependent on continued funding, is probably the thing. I mean, this has to be a continuous thing. We can't ever think we've got it fixed. We have to keep working on it all, because anytime changes in the economy or changes in anything can affect this. So I think we really have to put in place some mechanism that makes this an ongoing review all the time, because it's just going to be continuous. And we just aren't going to, I mean, I think we have to do everything we can to fix where we are right now, but I think it's a very continuous process. And I think that first line there is probably really telling. It's continued funding that's going to be the success of it, and we're never done.
The difficulty is when we do have the money to try to address it, we're making large payments to individuals, and then the immediate effect of that goes away, because right after we do it, we have people compressed going years forward. So what we were trying to think through is how could we put a plan in place that people could come into in future years, and they would understand where they fell in that process. That's what we were looking for. But it is difficult and it's complicated, and it took us a while to get here, and it's probably not going to be solved overnight.
Mr. Wood?
Thanks. And I commend what your group did putting it together. I mean, I think it's a very rational, very sound proposal. I think, as the manager said, what really hurt all this is the lack of communication with the folks at the street level. And I think that's a place we need to work, because frankly, and I've got copies here of documents that were online that the employees accessed, indicating what the compression adjustments were going to be based on our budget. So this is kind of what they were all counting on.
Sure.
And I get that it's not the same. I get the reason why. Now, I do know that part of this, and I think one of the things both Bobby and Barbara said is part of this is to start working towards a comprehensive pay plan that will alleviate as much of this as humanly possible. And I think that's what your work group is continuing to work towards. And frankly, that's going to be a budget discussion next year, because there's going to be a price tag to that.
And there is going to be compression that will come forward again next year, just as it has this year. So it's a cycle.
I guess from my perspective, Mr. Mayor, I commend what they did, but I really think that what the council and what the employees thought they were getting was this. And this isn't a surprise to the deputy city manager or the manager, because the mayor and I talked to the manager about this, and I think that, in my opinion, and of course it's up to the council, but I think this is the method that we need to follow this year. But I really think that a comprehensive approach like the one you described is what we need to start working on now for the following budget year, so that we can plan for it, we can plan for the payment of it, and then also rolling this into a pay plan that would at least not eliminate the forever compression, but at least do the best that we can to mitigate it. Because I think Dave used the example of a senior NCO when he was a second or first lieutenant, and he might have been in charge, but he wasn't getting paid as much as his subordinate was. So, Mr. Mayor, that's my recommendation. It's not really a motion or anything, but it's just, I think that's what we ought to do. I don't know what the will of the rest of council is.
Ms. Wilson?
Yeah, it's only July 10th, and all of a sudden to change what we just approved, I just think our employees were counting on this. We should go ahead and follow through on what they were counting. Not that I don't appreciate your hard work, but I think we should go ahead and give them what they were counting on, and then move forward at a later date. Let's go ahead and do what they were counting on.
Mr. Moss?
I agree with the Rosemary, which I've had discussions, I think it's the right answer. But I think going forward, the panel needs to be bigger. Taxpayers have a stake in this because they're paying the bill. They need to understand it. There's insights from the business community. They deal with pay compression. They deal with, I've many times had people work for me who made more money because they're just a skill set that they had that's expensive. PhD scientists aren't cheap. So, and it's just the nature of the beast. Now, so I think we've got to have a bigger, more diversified group so that in the end, the stakeholder understanding both the people receiving it, the people paying for it, and people who have expertise dealing with this in a more competitive labor market, I think would have some insights that would help us look at the problem in a broader scheme. For those who always talk about these step systems, I always remind, and I know I've talked to some people here, that's an up and out system. We don't have an up and out system. We have an up and you can stay system. And that system is designed for about 2/3 of the people to keep falling off. And if you don't get promoted, you don't get to stay. And I didn't hear anybody volunteering for the up and out system, so you can't adopt, that's not affordable when everyone's at the top. We have lots more people at the bottom in the military scheme. So that, while it sounds appealing to people who just see it on the surface, the mechanics, you think flooding's expensive. I can just tell you that would be something and I appreciate what the manager's saying there. So, but I do think you got to have more people in the room talking about what that solution is. And at some point in time, a job is worth what a job is worth. And that's also has to be recognized as well. The average pay at Google is $275,000 for a reason. They don't have many employees and they generate a lot of revenue. And so their gross revenue per employee is in the hundreds of millions of dollars. So, but that isn't always the case when you're looking at government. It is a public sector, it is public service, competently paid, properly paid, but it's not quite the same. So I think that's why I think going forward, we've got to have a bigger group looking at the challenge so that when the answer comes, It's the payers and the receivers and the service providers, and everybody says, hey, this is what can, and it has to be, as Barbara said, what's executable, something I've shared with Bill many times. It has to be an executable plan. But I do believe we thought we approved that, and we thought that's what we were gonna be delivering.
Anybody else? I just have a comment. I agree with what Jim Wood has said here today. I guess I'll summarize it just in one sentence as far as I'm concerned. And that is, when we voted on the budget, we made a commitment. And we made a commitment to the personnel. And my feeling is that we should live up to that commitment. So that's where I am on it.
That was four sentences.
Jim corrected me. He said I gave 4 sentences. But, all right.
So, council, what I am being directed to do is to implement the previous program that we have adhered to over the last number of years, which was the computation sheets that you were provided at the budget to give you an idea of what the vertical compression impact was. And remember, during that time period, we were trying to figure out how much it was. And we were kind of all over the map. And I put HR and payroll through a bunch of nut drills down there on a person-by-person, employee-by-employee perspective to try to determine what it was. And so this, what is over my shoulder on this chart, represents $1 beyond the subordinate's current salary. It also takes into account fixing vertical compression for special skill identifier certified individuals, even though young captain firefighters who did not get certified are going to get paid for. And it is the same system that you have adapted over the past going forward. And that's exactly what that was when we put the budget together. The workforce, the working group's recommendation will be carried forward in our discussion about pay plans, because what we were recommending today is part of a systematic pay plan system that would address this. I would commend Councilman Moss on the up and out concept that we know from a military perspective that step plans are really difficult. It is one of the reasons why the Department of Defense is an expenditure-based program. They don't set their own tax rates, they don't set their own fees like you have to at the local level. And if the economy turns bad and you don't have those funds, you still got to pay that step increase. And so if you get down that road, just understand that when we went through the recession, we were one of those fortunate cities that did not have that kind of a public safety program like so many cities got hoodwinked into belonging to, and it almost bankrupted those cities, and they had to cut back schools, they had to cut back infrastructure, they had to cut back all other aspects of staff. So we will carry that forward, and I am going to move forward with a vertical nod from the council that you want to implement the program that you've been implementing and that those computation sheets were based on, and that is that $548,000 salary increase for this year.
I think so.
All right. Any more discussion on this issue?
In closing, I want to thank you on behalf of our employees because they are the most important asset that we have in public safety. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe we have some pending planning items. Mr.
Okay,
City Manager.
so we are prepared, I think, maybe not. We are. I'm getting a nod from the bullpen that they are prepared and they're going to go super fast. We're still on schedule, Mayor. Who's up first, Jimmy? Carolyn.
Here.
All right.
Good afternoon.
Jimmy McNamara and I are here to give you a quick overview of the planning items that we have scheduled for you in August, and these are tentatively scheduled. And I say that because the Planning Commission has not heard all of these items, but this is your last meeting in July, so we wanted to give you our best guess of how we think the agenda is going to play out for you in August. And so what you have in your packet has been tweaked a little bit to what you will see here today. So there are 10 items scheduled for August 7th. Item 1 is a conditional use permit for a home occupation for retail sales in the Indian Lakes neighborhood, and this is specifically for the sale of firearms out of the home. So sales will be by appointment only, and the conditions recommend that the hand-to-hand transactions be limited to 5 per month, and the applicant has submitted letters of support from their surrounding property owners, and we're not aware of any opposition to this item. Item 2 is a request for in-home daycare for up to 12 children in the Glenwood neighborhood. This single-family dwelling is on a nice corner lot, so there's ample area for the pickup and the drop-off of the children, and also for them to play outside, and staff is not aware of any opposition. Item 3 is a request for conditional use permit for a communications tower located on the Elks Lodge property off of Prosperity Road in the Beach District, and this tower will address coverage issues that T-Mobile customers are experiencing in the vicinity. This 59-foot tall tower is designed to accommodate up to 4 additional providers. They have submitted all of the required documentation, and the applicant has been in contact with the surrounding property owners, and we're not aware of any opposition. Item 4 is a subdivision variance request along Daniel Smith Road in the Newsom Farms neighborhood. This is a larger lot, just about 1 acre, and they are proposing to subdivide it into 2 parcels, each that will ultimately have a new single-family dwelling on them. The zoning ordinance requires that newly created lots in the R7.5 district have a minimum lot width of 75 feet. These lots are proposed with 66 feet of lot width, so a subdivision variance is required. Each lot will far exceed the minimum lot area of 7,500 square feet, as each of these lots will be just about 21,000 square feet. So as you can see on the graphic, there is a pattern of single-family development in the vicinity, and staff is supportive of this request. Item 5 is a conditional use permit for a commercial kennel that's located off of West Neck Road in the Princess Anne District. The applicant proposes to train up to 12 dogs, specifically with a focus to assist veterans, and the former hog barn on the site is being retrofitted to house the dogs, and it will be outfitted with both heating and air conditioning, and staff is not aware of any opposition. Items 6 and 7 are also for in-home daycare. Item 6 is within the Bayside District. Both of these are for up to 12 children. Item 7 is on Edwin Drive in the Kempsville District. This item does have 1 letter of opposition that we've received. It's from a property owner that's about 5 or 6 properties to the south, and she has noted concerns with the increase in traffic over time along Edwin Drive, and also the perception that this is a commercial use that's not appropriate in a residential district. Item 8 is on a city-owned piece of property at the entrance to Tidewater Community College. It's been marketed by Economic Development, so you're probably familiar with this request. It's specifically for a rezoning of about 6.5 acres to conditional B4 mixed-use district in order to construct up to 2 hotels and then a freestanding restaurant. The site is located in the Princess Anne Special Economic Growth Area 4, which does recommend hospitality uses, so it's consistent with our comprehensive plan. And the site's also located in the less than 65 noise zone, so it checks that ACUS box. The applicant intends to partner with TCC and offer some real-world hands-on hospitality training for students. And the vehicular access for the 3 future parcels will be all via a single point of ingress-egress along Community College Place, so there'll be no new ingress-egress along Princess Anne Road. And as recommended by the comprehensive plan, they have submitted a preliminary stormwater management strategy, and staff concurs with those findings. And we are not aware of any opposition to this item. So this is Asheville Park, which you are all very familiar with. Village D will be eliminated. And so that will bring the total number of units throughout Asheville Park to 455. So we are awaiting revised plans and revised proffers to give you some more detail about that in the agenda request form. But one question that was asked, the parcels on the northern section of Village C, the applicant's attorney says that they will be at least the same size and the same lot width, if not larger than the existing parcels in Heritage Park. So once we get that revised plan, we'll be able to verify that.
Yes, please, now tell me that again. So they are going to have that northern tier in Village C comparable to the adjoining lots in Heritage Park?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
So we will verify that once we get that new plan, but yes. So that'll address some opposition that was raised in 2015 at the Planning Commission meeting, and then you've heard that concern also from those residents in Heritage Park recently. And then the final item on August 7th is a request of the ARE, who is proposing to install up to 3 roadside guide signs at locations at the oceanfront. The code allows for nonprofit establishments such as this to request the installation of such signs subject to the City Council's approval. The sign is depicted there on the left and will not exceed the limit of 5 square feet. And this comes directly to you, not to Planning Commission, but we'd like to brief you on that so you know it's coming. And with that, I will turn it over to Jimmy for August 21st.
All right. So rolling through quickly, we've got 10 items that are scheduled for your August 21st meeting. You will see that 4 of these requests are for the placement of storage containers on Walmarts across the city. 2 of these are zoning ordinance amendments, and those are on tap related to fines and violations, and then for food trucks. And Kay Wilson will be briefing you on those 2 items. So first up is a request to place 2 U-Haul trucks or trailers for rental on an existing retail establishment. So as you will see here on the plan, the vehicles are going to be located to the northern side of the building here, and they will not be on the street frontage, and there is sufficient parking on the site to accommodate this. We are not aware of any opposition at this time. Next is a request for a car wash and automobile repair establishment along Regency Drive off of Laskin Road. The applicant proposes to operate a 1-bay automated car wash along with 20 covered vacuum spaces. There is also an auto detail and maintenance facility along the property's northern boundary. Only light repair, such as brakes, lighting, and fluid replacement will be permitted within the site, so no painting or engine repair. And staff is not aware of any opposition to this request. Next is an existing storage yard for the repossessed cars that exists on this site. As part of the approval for the modification of proffers that came through in 2012, a time limit of 5 years was placed on the use. The applicant is now requesting an extension of the time limit for an additional 5 years. The site is surrounded by an 8-foot-high chain link fence with aluminum slats, and staff does recommend approval and is unaware of any opposition at this time. So now we get to the Walmart. So we're going to roll through these pretty quickly. There are 4 of these. 3 of these have been before you before, and then there's the first Colonial one will be coming through for its first use permit. So Plan Commission previously recommended and City Council approved a 2-year time limit on the use for these. And the 2 years is coming up, and they've been proactive, and they want to get before you before the 2-year time limit is up. So they are requesting now a conditional use permit without the time limit.
You mean it to be permanent?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, well.
So that is their current request. It has not been the Planning Commission as of yet. So the proposed location for the 20 storage containers at the Nimmo location is actually on the adjacent site behind the existing building. The area is sufficiently screened from any rights-of-way by an existing mature hedge of tall evergreen shrubs, and we are unaware of any opposition at this location. As previously stated, the first Colonial location is requesting a conditional use permit for the first time. This request is specifically for 10 containers alongside the store. As these containers are visible from some of the parking areas, the applicant will install screening consisting of wooden planks similar to the picture on the right to be placed along 2 sides of the containers where it would be visible. Staff is not aware of any opposition to this request. The Walmart along Lynn Haven Parkway is also requesting 20 containers located behind and beside the store. The area is screened from nearby residential lots and the rights-of-way with existing mature evergreen trees. We did receive a letter of opposition to this one, but it regarded additional traffic and noise generated from the Walmart use. And finally, the first Walmart in Virginia Beach, the Phoenix Drive one, they are requesting 10 containers beside the building along the northern property line. As you can see on the picture, a mature stand of trees exists on the adjacent parcel. Staff is unaware of any opposition to this request as well.
Go back to the previous one, I'm sorry. One more. That one? That's in my district, where is it? Oh, put sandstone. Okay, thank you.
All right, so item number 8 brings us to the oceanfront.
Back, can you just let us know the number of parking spaces they're consuming in each and every one of those locations?
I certainly can. I believe most of these are going to be in areas that there are no parking spaces,
I just
but
saw some parking lines in that other one just then.
we can certainly give you the number. All right, number 8 brings us to the oceanfront for a request for alternative compliance. This is a proposal to develop the site with 234 multifamily units. Form-based code limits multifamily units within a hotel to 15%. This proposal is for 100% of the units to be multifamily. The proposal will meet the mixed-use building type criteria, which requires non-residential use to be located within the ground floor of the building. The land use study that was submitted by the applicant shows a restaurant facing the boardwalk and retail facing Atlantic. The proposal will meet the minimum parking requirements of the form-based code, and no less than 1.3 parking spaces will be provided in a parking structure to be developed at 2701 Pacific Avenue. And with that, I will turn it over to...
The first amendment that's going before the Planning Commission tomorrow is an ordinance that would get rid of minimum fines for zoning ordinances. It would also do an enhanced penalty for continuous violations. This is from the General Assembly, and we are required to change the ordinance for this, so. Sorry. The other is about food trucks. And I didn't know this would be on the 21st. However, we will go on there. And what this is the zoning ordinance for food trucks. There are approximately 4, maybe 5 ordinances that will come before you all to expand the use of food trucks in the city of Virginia Beach. Essentially what they will do is they will take them from being peddlers into being mobile food vending. This will make it easier for mobile food vendors to get licenses here and make the operation of their business much easier. What we've done here is we have allowed the zoning ordinance to either have them allowed or not have them allowed. They are not allowed in residential areas except for if there is a special event or if there is a active building permit, more for those areas where there is a
City attorney has a comment.
Well, I have a question. This is an issue that has been of great importance to the council. Some council members have worked on the task force to put it together. As I understand it, this is scheduled for August the 21st. You'll have one other meeting and a workshop. Can I request permission to put together a formal informal session briefing for you on food trucks, rather than to try to summarize that? Kay's doing a good job, but she's trying to do it on the fly. And I think the issue deserves more time than that.
We have to vote on the 21st.
It's supposed to go to planning tomorrow, just the zoning.
Yeah, but I mean, I think before it's like a lot of the other stuff we do. I mean, it's like short-term rentals. I mean, that went to planning, they spent hours and hours and hours, it came back to us, and it's been completely dissected. So I don't know if there's a way that we can stop this and have it
We'll just defer it tomorrow. Yeah, we can defer it tomorrow at Planning Commission until their September meeting.
Well, it does have the support of the people of Ms. Abbott and Mr. Dyer, who worked hand in hand, I believe, with the committee who put it together. I wasn't trying to cause that result. I was just trying to say, we want you to have a fuller briefing than we can give you at this moment.
If I can, Bobby and I think we've like had 7 or 8 meetings on it, and we've been vetting it through all of the different shareholders and stakeholders in this. And I think we've reached a pretty good understanding of what we wanted this to look like. I'm hesitant on pulling it from Planning Commission because part of the reason for putting it on Planning Commission is so that the people who are doing business in the city don't have further delay in the issues that they've encountered in trying to operate food trucks in Virginia Beach. So I'm not sure, I agree, I would love a full brief. I know that the food truck people would love a full brief. I mean, Bobby and I have said from the beginning, we want everyone to be as informed on this as possible. But I don't think that what Planning Commission has to do prohibits either. I mean, Bobby, I don't know if you agree with that or not, but my feeling would be to let it go to planning and then us have a brief, and maybe if we defer our vote, that's fine.
I mean, there's an issue with the process here because
Yeah.
it's going to Planning Commission before we know anything about it other than this 2-minute briefing. And Mark correctly says that we need to know about it. I mean, we've got the example right in front of us with short-term rentals. I mean,
already
Planning
had
Commission
calls
did 25
about
hours
apartments and
on
food
short-term rentals, and we just gutted it, so.
Well, but in the short, it's not exactly like short-term rentals, because in the connection with short-term rentals, you actually did refer those 3 versions to them for their consideration, and we,
2 years.
and we still ended up gutting them, and there is precedent. And I'm not saying we shouldn't, I'm not offering any value judgment.
There is opposition to this, and so that's why I want to make sure that we hear about it.
I've heard from
There's significant
Yeah,
opposition to this.
yeah, I'm gonna say, Jess, in a way, I think it might be not a bad idea just to defer it out, just a little bit, to have the council get up to speed on what is going on. And understand in doing that the process that we went through, we had representatives from the bricks and mortar, we had the food truck people, and we also had folks that own brick and mortar that had food trucks. But the other thing we did preemptively, we had people from permits and code enforcement, we had people from police, we had people from Parks and Rec, the people that would be giving input into this, preemptively, to try to get this ironed out. Now, I know this is the type of subject that is going to lead to some opposition. But the thing is, the more information we get out, so if we're briefed and then that word gets out, to the people, it may actually help, explain, the process of what we're doing. And the other thing is too, that, nothing that we're gonna be able to do now is gonna help the food truck folks, this summer, okay? So the point is, we're looking forward to next year. And, the other thing is Parks and Rec needs some other time. They may want to, for instance, they were talking about putting food pads, cement pads down at Mount Trashmore and other places, and then them actually control who goes in. So there was a lot of detail that actually went into this that was really well vetted. So I am, not adverse at all to have council at least brought up to speed about everything that we have done, because I'm sure that, if this can blunt some of the misperceptions that are out there about what we're trying to do. And the point is, though, I think there were congenial meetings, between all 3 of the major actors involved here. But bringing in all the other, and it was really a healthy discussion, listening to people from code enforcement, what they thought, police, what they thought. So there was a lot of information that went into it that I think it would benefit the council to know before it went there, and then maybe actually do some more tweaking and enhance the process.
I'd also like to see, to make sure that the people that we had on the Process Improvement Committee are present as well.
Oh, for sure.
So they can put their input in, because it was really a diverse group. It wasn't one of any, it wasn't just a big group of one type of person. It was a lot of good conversation, in my opinion.
Yeah, okay.
So is council direction
I
to
think
defer
it
this
would be.
to the September Planning Commission
Everybody
meeting?
likes delays, but
I'm
maybe it
sorry,
might be time well
what
spent.
is it you want to do now?
I was asking if the consensus then was to defer this item to the September Planning Commission meeting, with us doing a brief for this council in one of the first 2 weeks of August.
That's fine.
I have no problem with that at all.
I think everybody's in agreement to that, yes. Thank you, Kay.
Thank you.
All right. I believe that's all you have, Mr. Manager.
Yes, sir, I'm tuckered out.
I'm going to call we'll go over city council comments first. Anybody have anything?
I do have one, because this is in the public record. I know we got the notice last week, or I guess it was last week, they'll run together, before last, about how our case on the captain's examination, competition, and promotion selection was dismissed. But I thought it was important to hear what the judge had to say at the end, because it was telling, it's a matter of public record. This is Judge Lewis, and he says at the end, "Let me make it clear to everyone who's interested in this case that I'm in no way, shape, or form condone what was done by the folks in charge running this captain's examination. I can well understand why the grievance are upset about it. I would be too. Cheating is cheating. It's not right. That having been said, I'm going to have to agree with the city that I don't have jurisdictions to hear the case." And I think it's important for all of us to know what the judge had to say. I think it's important for the public to know. And I think it's important for the grievance who weren't there and the firefighters to know that while they weren't able to proceed and get a judicial remedy, the judge saw that something was wrong there. And I hope that that isn't repeated.
All right. Any more city council comments? We now need to review the agenda.
Okay, under ordinances resolution, we have speakers on items 2 and 10. And on item 2, as you all know, this was a recommendation coming from the city clerk's office. I do appreciate all the love I've personally gotten on this particular item. The mayor actually has a recommendation for this, if you want to share yours, Mr. Mayor.
I talked with Jim about this earlier, and I asked if he would be agreeable to trying something else first, quite frankly. And that is that when at the beginning of the meeting, formal meetings, that we would, I would, or the chair, whoever the chair is, would make the statement that anybody who had not already signed up to speak on an item would be allowed to speak on that item after all of the persons who had signed up have spoken. In other words, the chair would call upon the clerk to call the names of the people who had signed up, and once all of them had spoken and had their say, then the chair would ask for is there anybody else who would like to speak on this item? And if there are, they can get in line and come up and speak. I'd just like to try that if we could, and I'm hesitant to tell people who have come down to the council meeting to speak, and maybe they got there late because of traffic problems, or maybe they got there late for some other reason. I don't know what the reason might be, but I just think we ought to try this at least before we actually exclude people from being able to speak at council meetings.
So does that require a change to the code, or can we just do that?
No, I think you can just do that, because that's essentially what the current policy.
What we're doing now.
Well, the current policy says you can't speak after.
Except under extenuating circumstances. And so I guess you would be acknowledging that anybody came in and said they wanted to speak, wasn't there in time due to an extenuating circumstance.
Yes, John.
Well,
Isn't that the language?
what we were trying to cure was the distraction as people were trying to register. So within what you would state at the beginning of the meeting, would you state not, if you have not registered?
Yeah, please do not try to register
Please do not try
with
and
the clerk.
register, that we have closed registration. However, at the end, we
Right.
will allow people to speak.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that, I wouldn't mind trying that, but if you don't say that, then you
Right.
still got people coming into the city
Right.
clerk, and
Yeah.
you still got that distraction, and you
Which
have it.
Well, we have to make it clear, or just like we do the
Right.
3-minute thing
Right.
and so
then,
forth.
and then how challenging for you, Amanda, is that then to be able to capture their contact information after they speak?
We'll make it work.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, they wouldn't be bothering her
Until afterwards.
Well, right,
yeah.
but she still has to capture their information, so that the way the
Right.
system has worked now is that they have to give that information before they come to the podium.
Right.
Now, they're gonna go to the podium.
Right.
They're gonna speak, and then Amanda's gonna have to try and capture their.
Well, we can just tell them to identify themselves and their,
Well, they're not, they're gonna
Yeah,
have,
but
to
she still
choose
needs
their
that
address.
information.
Address and phone numbers are also
Yeah,
included.
right.
in there.
What is prohibiting us from setting up a tablet kiosk when people walk in to sign up, or having a downloadable app for people to be able to do that on the spot?
We're working towards that, but that's a few months away.
Okay. That's fine. I just think that's really what we need to be addressing.
IT is working towards that, but that's a few months out, so.
Well, we're off the next 3 weeks.
does anybody object to that?
I do not.
Nope.
That means everybody
So
gets a chance to
what are
speak.
we voting on? Are we voting on
Not
nothing?
voting on
Okay, that's what I wanted to
Well,
understand.
we're just-
Right now, the language of the policy, just so everybody here hears it, right now, the policy says, this is under 5.0 registration of speakers. Any person desiring to address the council shall register with the city clerk prior to the opening of the meeting. That's the first sentence. The second sentence is, the inadvertent failure to do so, however, shall not, however, disqualify any person from speaking. So the council may do what the mayor just proposed, consistent with the existing language with no change.
And we can try that. If it doesn't work, then we can always,
Yeah, so we can just withdraw this or whatever.
You could,
If
you
there's no
could
motion on it,
withdraw
right?
it, you could defer it indefinitely, you could vote it down and bring it, you all can always bring back anything you want to bring back when you want to bring it back, so,
Withdraw it.
Withdrawal sounds.
I'll just scratch it.
okay.
More neutral sound.
If you can let the speaker not, just one speak on this.
Yes.
Yeah, see if they don't, maybe they don't want to speak.
Which item?
That's item I2,
Two.
so consent for withdrawal.
What was the other item, though? that had
The other
speak-
item is item 10, Sports Center. So does anybody have any issues with any of the other ordinances or resolutions? Going once.
Apparently not.
All right, under planning, item J1, Enoch Baptist Church and Volunteers of America Incorporated, modification of conditions regarding a group home at 5677 Herbert Moore Road, Kempsville District.
Good.
St. Luke Catholic Church and Catholic Diocese of Richmond for modification of conditions regarding religious use at 2304 Salem Road, Princess Anne District.
That's fine.
John S. and Karen S. Waller from conditional change of zoning from AG1 to AG2, agriculture to conditional R10 residential at 2313 Tree Song Trail in the Princess Anne District.
No opposition.
J&B Design Incorporated and Village Shops Associates LLC for conditional use permit regarding a tattoo parlor at 3157 Virginia Beach Boulevard, Beach District.
No issues, Mr. Vice Mayor. Consent, please.
The Lash CEO LLC and Siphon Development Company Incorporated for conditional use permit regarding a tattoo parlor at 1060 Lynn Haven Parkway, Rose Hall.
That's fine.
Nina and William Gilbert regarding, for conditional use permit regarding residential kennel at 5716 Blackwater Road, Princess Anne District.
That's fine.
And the seventh one is Holly Properties LLC and Gopa 3 LLC for conditional use permit, automobile repair garage, Beach District requesting withdrawal. Are you okay with withdrawal? All right, that's
Sorry,
it.
I just received an email. We are gonna have to pull number 6 on ordinance resolutions and number 7 as well. Really speaker.
6 is the bonds and 7 is FEMA money.
Yes.
Okay. Or not FEMA money, flood mitigation money.
Mr. just emailed me and would like to speak on those 2 items.
Okay.
Well, that digital sign is already working.
All right. Chair will entertain a motion to recess into closed session pursuant to the exemptions from open meetings allowed by Section 2.2-3711A Code of Virginia is amended for the following purposes. Publicly held property, discussion of consideration, the acquisition of real property for public purpose, or of the disposition of publicly held property where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A3, Princess Anne District. Legal matters, consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff members or consultants pertaining to actual or probable litigation where such consultation or briefing in an open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating or litigating posture of the public body in consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by a public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A7, Estate of India Kager versus Fiera et al., WJP, LLP, LLC, internal EEO investigation, personnel matters, discussion, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific public officers, appointees, or employees of any public body pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A1, council appointments, council boards, commissions, committees, authorities, agencies, and appointees, and appointee evaluations. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Ms. Henley? Mr. Dyer?
Aye.
Mr. Moss?
Aye.
Mr. Davenport?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Ms. Kane?
Aye.
Mr. Ern?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Wood?
Aye.
Proctor Mayor Jones?
Aye.